Okay. I would like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting December 1st, 2025 to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Mikulik, Councillor and Chair of the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee. I would like to begin by reading a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the council chamber doors and obey all instructions given, and if assistance is required, please see the clerk. Once you evacuated the building, please gather in front of Town Hall in the parking lot outside. Please ensure your cell phone is on silent or turned off. And lastly, the Town of Lincoln Committee of the Whole meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. Closed captioning is available on all our videos by selecting the closed captioning button on the bottom right of the video. Item 2, roll call. Members of committee are in attendance. We have staff in attendance in person and remotely. Declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? I see none. Confirmation of agenda. Do members have any amendments to the order of the agenda? I see none. Item 5, statutory meetings. We have no statutory public meetings this evening. Consent agenda. We are now considering the consent agenda inclusive of age-friendly and active community minutes of September 4th, 2025, Heritage Advisory Committee minutes of September 11th, 2025, Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Area, BIA, 2026 budget, EDC-17-25, and 2025 Q3 operating and capital financial report, FN-1525. Would any member of committee like to remove one of these items to discuss? Okay, I don't see anybody with their hand up or their button on. I just want to make a comment that I noticed in these, in the Q3 operating and financial report. I can be a difficult customer. I can be a tough counselor when it comes to finances and this sort of thing. And I wanted to say that I did acknowledge that we have a interest income that's $281,000 up from $120,000. I did notice that. I think that's terrific. And also the debt servicing charges down $501,828. I did notice those numbers. I think that's good news. And I think last time I acknowledged that they were higher than normal, so it's good to see that finance is working on that. So nothing to discuss, just a comment. Moving right along. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachariva that all items listed under the heading consent agenda for Monday, December 1st, 2025 be adopted as recommended. Age-friendly and active community minutes of September 4th, 2025, Heritage Advisory Committee minutes of September 11th, 2025, Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Area, BIA 2026 budget, EDC-17-25, and 2025 Q3 operating and capital financial report, FN-15-25. I will now ask our clerk to open the vote.
Thanks, Chair, and the vote is now open.
Not coming up, so
Councillor Jima, are you in favor?
I am in favor.
Thank you. I will close that vote, and that carries.
Perfect. All right, moving along. Community Services and Infrastructure Committee agenda. We will now begin the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee agenda. 7.1 delegations. We have no delegations this evening. 7.2 reports. We will now consider item 7.2.1 report PW-12-25 regarding infrastructure update 2025 year in review. The Director of Public Works will provide comments. Director Graham, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of committee. Yeah, I'd just like to make a few opening remarks. So the report before you this evening is just for informational purposes. It's intended to provide a year-end update on the town's infrastructure projects and operational programs. We also try and include an update on the regional projects that are also occurring throughout the community. The report also presents key statistics. We identify trends where we can and outline some performance targets as it relates to infrastructure and service delivery from the previous seasonal quarters that since we've last reported to council on. A lot of work has been accomplished to date in this report, and I'd like to take an opportunity to acknowledge and thank all the staff behind the scenes for their continued hard work and dedication in helping deliver these important services to our community. And with that, both myself and our Manager of Capital Projects, Walter Neubauer, are here to help answer any questions committee may have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Dave. Are there any questions from committee? All right. Councillor Timmers, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you to Director Graham. Great report, Dave. A lot of information. I think it's, you know, it's really great to see where we're at, what's coming, what's completed. So just when I was going through the report, I had a couple of questions around the Sand Road, the drainage assessment study that's happening in the Sand Road and CN Tracks and the Golden Horseshoe Estates area. Just wondering where we're at. I see what you've written here, but you know, this has been since March 2024. So if you could just let me know where we're at and what the next steps are. And what kind of, if you have any kind of timelines at all, that would be really appreciated.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, thanks for the question. So yeah, the town, we're in pretty good shape on this study. It's we're pretty much finalized. There's been a lot of work done to take a look at the whole drainage shed. Where we are right now, we're going to be meeting with the Golden Horseshoe Trailer Park landowners and CN Rail Agency to outline the findings of the report, discuss that with them further. And then we'd like to be coming back to council with an update on the study outcome as well. So that'll be into next year. But it is coming to a conclusion, the study. We just need to meet with the different parties involved to review the findings.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. I think that's what I was after, just wondering where we're at with the study and when it'll be coming back to council. So that's very good. I think that's it, Chair. Thank you.
It's it's good that you brought that up because that was something that Vice Chair Brunet and myself discussed with Director Dave on Friday. Next, we have Councillor Brunet.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Director Graham. Dave, I'm wondering if you could just speak to, from a Town of Lincoln perspective, how we are looking into the future with regards to automated speed cameras. Obviously, the provincial government has made an announcement to ban these moving forward, so the Niagara Region program is on hold. But our residents are still reaching out to us. Councillor Patrieve and I had a resident reach out to us in early October with regards to Mountain Street in front of St. Helens and St. Mark's School and Church. And so I'm just wondering, from your perspective, how we continue to make sure that even though the provincial government is banning these, that as a municipality, we continue to look at our community safety as a priority.
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor, that's a great question. I mean, as we know, this is new in terms of the provincial position on the speed cameras. They're no longer in effect. The Niagara Region had speed cameras for our community on Mountain Street and Victoria Avenue and Vineland. So we've had some conversations with regional staff. They're kind of awaiting to see, what's sort of going to happen next in terms of the community safety zones, whether there'll be any new standard signage coming into play from sort of the provincial side of things. But I know in terms of the Mountain Street Community Safety Zone, for example, we are in discussions with the region and advocating to improve some form of a pedestrian crossing in that area. So those discussions are happening. I don't have a timeline on that, but that is something that we do want to see happen in the near future.
Yeah, so just as a follow-up, Councillor Foster, I know, has spoken to Mr. Tassoni, and there was some emails that were back and forth, and I think from my perspective, I guess, what I just want to put out there is that, obviously, these become budgetary discussions, and, there's probably many municipalities around the region that are looking to have these things implemented, and so then they go into a design queue, and then they go into a budget mode. So I guess, more than anything, I want to ensure that from a staff perspective, this is still being moved along. But I think, it's imperative that, our two regional councillors continue to advocate this, across the municipality. So I appreciate that. And just as through you, Chair, just a comment with regards to this booklet. I think it's really important that at the front of the book we're actually recognizing behind the scene some of our employees, some of the workers. I think that's really important from a morale standpoint, and maybe a lot of people maybe don't see these people on a day-to-day basis, but certainly acknowledge them for the work that they're doing. Thank you, Chair.
Good points, especially that, the page, the people behind the work. Doesn't just all happen. Next, we have Councillor Pachariva.
Thank you, Chair McLurk, and through you to Director Graham. Project 8, 30 road reconstruction. So I see here where it says, stakeholder engagement 2026, construction deferred to 2032. And Dave, we heard loud and clear at Councillor Bernay and my ward meeting that 30 road is, continuing to be, on people's radars. I drove it on Saturday, and it's chock full of potholes all down the middle, and, it's been pointed out by us with the walk we did a few years ago. It's a stark reality, the change of where Grimsby ends and we start. The type of pavement, structure, completely different. So if we can move, and I know it's based on the region redoing the intersection along with us as King Street, but if we're able to move that up at all, I think it'd be greatly appreciated. I know these documents are fluid, so just want to get that on your radar and hear your comments on that.
Go ahead, Director.
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor, a couple comments would be, our mandate right now is we want to get the design work completed so we can really quantify the costs and have accurate costs to move forward with. So that's our priority right now, to complete the design, get an estimated cost. We can have further discussions on our capital forecast. We do have a lot of projects, a lot of demands, a lot of financial constraints. So this is something we will be looking at, and there'll be more opportunities to talk about its timing in the future. But our mandate right now is to really get the design work completed and get a good cost put together.
Okay, and that's good to hear. And through you, a follow-up, Chair. So if we get all that planned out and ratcheted down in 2026, then it would be a shovel-ready project and would be hopefully able for grants if those things come out. Is that our end goal?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Councillor. The more we can be shovel-ready, the better for any external funding opportunities. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. Second question, Chair?
Go ahead.
If I may. So, social infrastructure. So, the Tamarack Avenue pedestrian bridge replacement, this came up in our active communities and age-friendly. We had applied for funding for the bridge. Were we successful in that at all?
Through Mr. Chair to the counselor, I haven't heard either way
Okay.
on the grant results or the application we applied for. I will follow up on that to see if we know anything more, but I don't think we've heard back yet.
Okay, because, yeah, the hope was that, we would get some funding to cover that off because, the decision was made to only do one. And then when you look at the numbers and the linkages that the committee felt that those dollars could be redirected into the other bridge. So third question and final one. So this has to do with Vision Zero road safety. So Project 2, and Councilor Bernay touched on that. Do we, knowing the speed cameras and knowing that the dollars that they generated were supposed to be used for Vision Zero, do we get any idea of what that generated, like on Mountain Street?
Through Mr. Chair to the counselor, I know our Director of Finance is on the meeting as well. So the town we did get revenue from this program as it relates to both Mountain Street and the Victoria Avenue speed cameras. But maybe our Director of Finance might be able to share more on that amount.
Through you, Chair, to the counselor. Sorry, what was the question about the amount? About the amount that was collected?
Yeah, I don't need the amount. I'm just wondering if the region shares with us the amount of tickets that were generated when we had the speed camera on Mountain Street. Because again, the neighborhood has identified that this is an issue. So we got the community safety zone extended last year as part of the Mountain Street development, and just curious, like number-wise on what the results were, and is the hypothesis of the residents who live on that street, who use that crosswalk, is that, yes, speeding was an issue, and the camera helped curb it. And then, like Councilor Bernay said, like, what's the next step? So, if it's a 50-50 split with the region, surely they can use some of those funds to institute that overhead crosswalk ASAP, right? Because a problem's been identified.
Through you, Chair, to the counselor, yes, I don't think we have that information about the tickets. It's something we can try to look into potentially if there's any data that can be shared, but I'm not aware of having that information at this time.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was just curious on what the back and forth is, like when these go in, what kind of reporting do we get back, right? That would be helpful, and it would aid us all in ward meetings, in conversations with residents that identify this. Residents who live in the area know better than anyone what the traffic patterns are and what the speed are and what the issues are. So if we can get that, I think that would be good. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that's a tough question. I appreciate Charlotte or Tunikakis making an attempt, but to source those sorts of specific numbers, I would maybe shoot an email earlier in the afternoon and she can have those sorts of numbers ready. I think it's a great question as far as what sort of revenue is generated or could be possibly lost. But I mean, with everything she's got going on financially, that's a tough question to answer.
And I apologize for that. I was
Yeah.
just thinking about it on my drive here. because
Perfect.
I drove past it again, right? And I thought, what's the level of sharing of information?
Yep.
Right?
No, I appreciate that, but,
Yeah.
and that goes for all of us,
And I
like when we're
apologize.
asking
Sorry
for
about that.
specific sorts of numbers like that, that can be sourced, and I'm sure she'll find out that and share it all with us later. Next, we have Councillor Rinjema.
Thank you, Chair Mikulik. And my first question is on page 15, under environmental project number 1. Oh, also about the Sand Road drainage study. Director Graham, you and I sat out there a couple of years ago because one of the residents reached out to me and asked me consistently about the concerns in the area. So I think the timing for getting this done is great because we're going to have spring thaw, we're going to have water again. I know they've suffered a lot. So my question is, I read quickly through this, and I heard what you said earlier on, is CN involved in the discussions also?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, yes, they are.
Okay. Okay, that's all I wanted to know. And I have another question, Mr. Chair. Page 9, which is project number 4, Green Lane Road reconstruction. So the multi-use path there, when Councillor Russell and I had our ward meeting, it was brought up by one of the residents in the area, not particularly about this spot, but another path that we have in the community, and how motorized vehicles are, to her, a problem. You know, she sees them coming up behind her and going a little faster than everybody else, and some of them are very quiet. She can't hear them. We asked about that, and we're advised that they are restricted. By law, let me know they are restricted. And there's signage apparently too. So it's a matter of how do you catch people when they're doing it? You can't have somebody on site all the time watching every path, seeing if a motorized vehicle goes by, be it an e-bike or anything like that. So my question is about this multi-use path. There's enough room on there for somebody to walk down there, ride a bicycle, maybe a motorized vehicle as well could probably say, this is a good spot for me to go down to go through that area. Are we restricting motorized vehicles like e-bikes that can go quite quickly and be quite fast? And I think I already answered that question earlier on. Bylaw said yes. But is there signage that we're planning to put up along that trail to let people know that they can't use motorized vehicles, e-bikes, on that trail, or can they?
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor, we'll follow up on the signage. I think that would be definitely worthwhile if that's something residents are noticing with motorized vehicles on there. So we can definitely take that away and consider that for sure.
Okay, and the concern I heard wasn't to be specific. It wasn't about the Green Lane multi-use trail. It was about Congo Creek Trail. Yeah, that's right. But it brought this trail to mind because I could see it potentially being an issue on here. But if I didn't know any better and I had an e-bike, I'd say, sure, I can go down here on my e-bike. Maybe you can't, though. So thank you for following up on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. I think that's going to be an interesting one because some of these e-bikes, they look like bicycles. Some of these electric scooters, they look like electric scooters. I think that's going to be a tough one, but, you know, do your best. Next, we have Councillor Reimer.
Thank you, Chair Mikulik. A couple questions through you to Director Graham, just regarding, Dave, regarding the Black Cat radar locations on page 13. I see the numbers trending there up at 120. I know Councillor Timmers and myself have appreciated you placing that in some of our ward hotspots and the information we gathered from that. Are those, a couple questions specifically to that, are those same locations that we're placing it at, or are we getting information at new ones, like different ones that we hadn't thought of, or have we reached the max and we're just gathering more information on the same spots?
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor, it's probably a combination of both. We are trying to trend spots so we can build a trend on traffic patterns and speeds, but then we are open to a lot of requests for new locations that residents may ask or have concerns with speeding that we will target. So it's probably a combination of both. We are going back to the similar locations to build trends and doing new ones.
Follow-up question, if I may, Chair Mikulik. Just along those same lines, I know we had a mountain of data for the project where we dropped a lot of our municipal speed limits from 50 to 40. That data, along with this, are we keeping that? Does that stay somewhere where we can refer back to it, like year over year, or does it have a shelf life to it, or can we keep that all for ever and ever?
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor, great question. Yeah, we keep it. We keep that data to trend it, and so, yeah, it's
good.
definitely important information to hang on to.
Okay, great. Thanks, Director Graham. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. Next, we have Mayor Easton. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My questions are around the Regional 01, the Vision Zero. The last discussion that we had, that I was present at, we were talking about the upright, what do you call those? What do you call those? Is there a name for them? Yeah, the upright ones? Yes. And they seem to be so effective, and, but we don't know that for sure. So at the meeting, there was a discussion with Mr. Tassone about where these were being placed. Mountain Street was one, but there were a couple of other areas across the region, not a lot, but it was like a replacement for what had been there before. So I know that they have a report on this. I'm suggesting that we write a letter to the region, specifically to Frank, and ask him to report on the status of some of these matters. That could be one. Also, the question that Councillor Pachariva asked about the flashing lights, what is the status of them? And I know they have winter and summer plans, as well as the revenue distribution, not internally, but how much money did the town of Lincoln receive? I'd like to hear from their perspective, because the region does have a lot of data on the decrease in speeding. It was substantial. It was between 83 and 87% in some places. So that is a suggestion, that if we write a formal letter, then we'll all have the information at the same time. And the last comment I would like to make is about the multimodal location in Thorold along General Brock Drive. It's quite remarkable. It's down in the area where the 406 goes north and south, and it goes through that whole area. And I see people in there with everything under the sun, and they seem to be they're cohabiting quite well. Maybe they have some information, although Mr. Graham may have already researched this, and there might be others, but these multimodal locations are more frequent. Maybe we could find out some information about how they're managing some of the competition. But they're all very fast-moving, I know that. So, Mr. Chairman, for what it's worth, if we need a motion or just a direction for a letter, I think that Councillor Pachariva will be best prepared to do it because he had asked the largest number of questions on it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, would any staff member like to weigh in and give thoughts on how best to do that or what we should incorporate in that motion? CEO Kirkopoulos?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think probably the best bet would be for you to provide direction to staff, and I can take that direction for us to reach out to staff at the region and maybe invite them to come to present to council. So I don't think a formal motion or a letter from council is required. I think it's a staff-to-staff invitation that can be sent, and then we can make sure that they attend.
Mayor Easton, is that satisfying?
That's a good idea.
Okay, perfect. I think
I'm satisfied with that.
it's been a while since we've had a member of the region from the Public Works or Roads Works here, so that would be a good idea.
the bridge will be finished and we'll have lots of questions.
Perfect. Counselor Brunet. Sorry, Mary Easton, are you? Okay. Counselor Brunet.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff, maybe to Walter. I'm wondering if we could just, for the public, just speak to, what's happening with Lakeshore Road and shoreline protection. I know that Associated Engineering has been working on this, and I think originally when we first started talking about getting some funding, we were talking about a 10-year program, and now maybe it's been extended beyond that. So I'm just wondering if maybe staff can just speak to, what's going on behind the scenes and, what expected next steps are on Lakeshore Road and shoreline protection.
Through you, Chair, to the Councillor, thank you for your question. It's a big program. We have a number of phases along the lakeshore that either need to be relocated or need to be shored up to prevent erosion. Right now, staff is focusing on the first phase, which is which is Lakeside Drive, just east of Sand Road. We've been working on purchasing property. The design is 90% completed. Actually, today we received our permit from DFO, and that's our focus in 2026 is to build that first phase. We're looking to start construction probably in July because we have fish timing windows we need to contest with. We'll start with the shoreline work first and then come back in and finish the road rehabilitation and realignment. As for the remainder of the program, we have another 2 phases planned to be constructed in 2029. So over the next 3 years, staff will be working to get those designs ready, work on all the studies that are required to get permitting approval, and also engage with landowners on property acquisition.
That's great. Thank you very much for the update.
Our CAO, he was going, CAO
Through you,
Kirkhoff,
Chair.
do you want to add anything?
Absolutely. For you, I
It's
can
a
definitely.
it's a significant project, so, deserves a significant answer, not that, from 2 people.
Right, and I definitely think Walter gave you a very good technical, significant answer. But to your point, Chair, I will definitely chime in. We do want to be in front of council come the new year. We have, as council will realize, a project, or remember, a project that was approved. We are still working on the details of it. Councilor Brunet was right. It's a 10-year project worth tens of millions of dollars and a 60-40 split between ourselves and the federal government. One of the things staffs look to do is de-scope that project and determine the most necessary parts of the shoreline that require investment and give ourselves a number of exit ramps should we not want to continue. That negotiation has taken some time in terms of providing the appropriate wording. The federal government usually has a template and a way it likes to structure these agreements. So together with our legal counsel and theirs, we have worked back and forth. We really are in the short strokes of that. I know they requested some additional information today, and we do want to be in front of council. You've approved money for those initial phases, which are part of stage 1, and this is broken into multiple stages, but want to be in front of you and highlight for you the important parts that need to get done before things get really bad, but then the parts that don't need to get done. And show you what a de-scoped project looks like, because you'll recall that this was one of the things that council had directed us to look at and come back to you on. So hope to maximize the dollar, something that we've been working together with Public Works, the Project Management Office, Finance, and myself, but at the same time not, I think, hand tie and handcuff us with a capital program that is only focused on the lakeshore.
Perfect, okay. I think that's the kind of answer that I don't think Mr. Neubauer could have provided. That's something that the CAO would provide. Finally, there's one question, if everyone's, I don't see any names on the queue. With regards to, I have a question myself, 20 Mile Creek Bridge replacement, it was touched upon earlier, but I see that they've paved both sides. Saw in the news, great news about Western Hill, that bridge being completed earlier. Trying to understand, for the benefit of those down in the valley, including myself that has to go through the valley and wait for that stoplight. There's a bit of patience required. Do we have an idea of how that project's moving along? Good news? Bad news? No news?
Chair, I will have to get back to staff and get an update on the timing for completion of that, but my understanding is it's supposed to be completed soon.
Okay, that's perfect. All right. The residents that use that bridge daily they're certainly going to appreciate that sort of news. Okay. There's no other questions. I just want to thank this book it is a fantastic book. These QR codes, they will provide additional information with the click of your camera, everything you need to know. As Vice Chair Brunei noted, the people behind the work, a lot of information here. Members of the public are welcome to source this book using the website. It's all accessible, Investing in Infrastructure. Don't just treat this like a floor mat for your truck or your car. Take this, hang on to this magazine and retain it for future questions that residents may have. There being no further questions, I have a motion moved by Councillor Brunei that committee receive and file for information report PW-12-25 information regarding update 2025 year in review attached as Appendix A. I will now ask our clerk to open up the vote.
Thanks, Chair, and the vote is now open. Okay, and how do you vote? Thank you. And I'll close that vote. That carries, Chair.
Perfect. We will now consider item 7.2.2, Report FS-02-25 regarding Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act update. The Emergency Management Coordinator will provide comments. Ms. McGrath, welcome.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Much, and through you, Chair, to Council. I just wanted to bring some comments to support the report to you today. And first of all, to thank you for being an advocate on behalf of the town and the Emergency Management Program as it relates to the Emergency Management Civil and Protection Act. So as you recall, back in 2023, delegation at AMO and then the notice of motion to bring resolution to the province regarding opening up the act and doing a thorough review to modernize it. So I'm happy to see, and I feel that it was the delegation and resolution that helped push it along its way. The review and having input into modernizing it. So as you can see, quite a significant group was surveyed on how to, modernize it to today's standards. And I've provided, what some of those proposed changes are. I did highlight that the definition within the proposed act does not include any changes to the types of emerging hazards that we had identified, or you had identified in the resolution. But I was reminded, following this report, I was reminded that through the Hazard Identification Risk Assessment Program that the province has developed, that municipalities have to create or have to analyze the hazards within our own community. They've added 20 new hazards to the list, which includes things like public health emergencies, artificial intelligence, terrorism. So they've added 20 more. So while it's not included in the definition, they are recognizing it as emerging hazards. So part of building into our programs to better prepare and respond to. So, and get the support from the province in return. So they still have to, it has not been finalized. And then with that, once it is passed, there will be the development of the regulations that support the act. So there is opportunity for us to provide input and development going forward. So thank you again.
Thank you very much. Members of council have any question or committee? Councillor Timmers, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Ms. McGrath, thank you very much for the report. On page 81 of the report, there were some comments around Bill 25. The definitions were not changed or included, the new definitions. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull it up here. But I had a question around that. I was wondering why the definitions weren't changed, because, you know, this policy is incredibly outdated, and moving forward, you know, that I feel the definition should be addressed. So I don't know what your comments are. That was a question mark for me.
Councillor Timmers, I do agree with you. I was a little bit taken back to see that, you know, the actual definition was not revised in that way. But it's still going through the readings. I think it's been ordered for third reading, and I know that there have been some comments around that circulating. So, I mean, hopefully we might see some change with that still, and perhaps maybe through the regulations we may see that included there. But like I said, now that these emerging hazards have been identified within the Hazard Identification Risk Program, that there is support in emergency management through the legislation that way.
You know, I think it's great, you know, that it's being updated, but it was just a bit of a question mark for me, was why was that piece not updated as well? So hopefully, maybe that will come yet.
Yeah, I'm hoping. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Perfect. Next.
Thank you.
No other- Okay, perfect. We have Councillor Pachariva next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and through you to Ms. McGrath, thank you very much for the report. Good to see that we got some action from our delegation, and good to see that maybe it's not, you know, the result we wanted with it being in the definition, but you said it is in these emerging hazards. So would you, Kathy, at some point, would you be able to give us a list of these 20 emerging hazards when they finalize this, or can we comment on that? As you said, it's still going through readings, or so is there opportunity for us to provide input?
Yeah, through you, Chair, to Councillor Pachariva. The total list of hazards are identified already. So the HIRA program, the Hazard Identification Risk Assessment Program, is complete, and those hazards are listed and available, and I can share that.
Thank you.
Perfect. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but I figured I'd ask. I'm curious. In the report under enhancing community capacity in emergent management, the proposed legislation would, and it's got a number of points listed. One of them is enabling the Minister of Emergency Preparedness and Response to support and facilitate coordination as part of emergency management, which could involve coordination with Indigenous communities. What would that actually entail? Any insight?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Russell. I'm not 100% sure with that, where that goes, but I do know that mention of the Indigenous population within the Emergency Act was lacking, so they've included the Indigenous community in response and have actually included membership on the in the ministry to help support emergency response to all to that. To the Indigenous population, right? So, yeah, I don't have a clear answer for you.
Okay. I'm just wondering, would that be like specifically like for reserves where there's, again, emergencies on reserves or near reserves where you're, again, trying to coordinate with, again, those groups to see if there's some sort of mutual support that could be brought forward, or is it, again, getting Indigenous communities' input on our policies on how we do our preparedness here?
Yeah, I believe it's a combination of both.
Okay, thank you.
Chief Hudson, are you familiar with it? Yeah?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next, we have Mary Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. A couple of weeks ago, I attended a session with the Great Lakes cities, and I sat on a panel, and it included the Grand Chief from quite a remote reservation, and he spoke at that time about this type of collaboration, where the municipality and the Grand Chief and other of their hierarchy would speak about different issues. They didn't speak about emergency issues specifically, but they did speak about infrastructure issues and other common challenges for them. A woman was sitting to my left. She spoke, as did the Grand Chief, that they were dealing with in their community. Again, these are very remote communities where there's few resources available. And she spoke at some length about some land use issues and how they were coming to conclusions about how they could be shared. Some of the infrastructure could be shared. So I believe it is happening, but prior to that, I hadn't heard anything about it either. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, some additional information. Thank you, Councillor Patrieva, for bringing this motion forward in the first place. Thank you, Kathy, for, and Chief Hudson for looking into this and bringing this report forward. I think, it's interesting. This is an emergency management plan that was, I don't even know if I had a cell phone back then yet, and I don't even know if the definition of electric car is, included. So it's good that finally somebody's taking a look at this for what it is. There being no further questions, I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer that committee receive and file for information report FS-02-25 regarding the status of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. I will now ask our clerk to open up the vote.
Thanks, Chair, and the vote's now open. And I will close that vote. That carries.
Okay, as we have no further reports for the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee agenda, I will ask the clerk to transition to our next committee agenda. Planning and ECDev.
Thank you very much. So, without further ado, we will now begin the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda. Number 8.1 on our agenda is delegations. We have no delegations this evening. 8.2, we move to reports. We will now consider item 8.2.1, report PD-29-25, notice of intention to designate 2818 Prince William Street, Jordan. Our Manager of Planning and Development will provide comments. Ms. Coquiera, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. The Heritage Advisory Committee, together with town staff, have been actively engaging with property owners listed on the Heritage Registry to assess interest in pursuing formal designation. This initiative is in response to the province's More Homes Built Faster Act, which requires properties to be formally designated by January 1st, 2027, or risk being removed from the non-designated registry. As a result of town staff engaging with property owners, the owner of 2818 Prince William Street in Jordan Station expressed his interest in designating his property. A heritage research report, including a statement of significance, was prepared by Heritage Advisory Committee member Gary Dandridge and was shared with the property owner. Last month, the report was presented to the Heritage Advisory Committee. Both the report and the Heritage Advisory Committee recommends designation of the property. The subject property contains a wooden train station currently used as a residential dwelling, which is located on the south side of Prince William Street, east of Queen Victoria Street, and west of Jordan Road in the heart of Jordan Station. The building was moved from across the road along the tracks to its current location in April of 1976. In 2022, an interpretive plaque was installed on the property and a plaque unveiling ceremony was held. The former Jordan train station holds significant historical, architectural, and contextual value. Historically, it reflects the expansion of regional railways and their influence on rural and suburban development across Ontario. As part of the Grand Trunk and later Canadian National Railway line connecting Hamilton, St. Catharines, and Niagara Falls, the station served as an important hub for passengers, freight, and mail. It contributed to what was then known as Bridgeport's growth and established Jordan Station as a key shipping point for fruit and agricultural products, supporting the community's prosperity. Architecturally, the 1913 building is a well-preserved example of small-town railway design, blending Queen Anne Revival and stick-style elements. Features such as its elongated form, projecting bay, broad-hipped roof with decorative dormers, exposed brackets, traditional board and batten siding, and original color scheme contribute to its authenticity. Contextually, this station remains a recognizable landmark that reinforces the historic character and railway origins of Jordan Station. The property satisfies 6 of the 9 criteria for designation, as outlined in the research report. Staff therefore recommend the issuance of the Notice of Intention to Designate, and staff would also like to recognize Heritage Advisory Committee member Gary Dandridge for all his work on researching the property, and thank the property owner for his commitment to preserving this important piece of Lincoln's history. As far as next steps, should council direct staff to proceed to issue the Notice of Intention to Designate, it will be issued to the property owner, the Ontario Heritage Trust, and published in the local newspaper and on the town's website. Following a 30-day objection period, a designation bylaw will be brought forward to council for consideration. If no objections are received, the bylaw will come into effect and be registered on title, and a designation ceremony will be scheduled at a later date. Once the property has been formally designated, the owner will be eligible to apply for a town heritage grant to support any restoration work on the property's designated heritage attributes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from committee? Councillor Renchma, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Murray. I'm curious, this doesn't happen very often that somebody comes forward and designates their own property. It's good. I'm familiar with the building. It's a nice building, a beautiful spot on that street. So next steps, there's going to be an opportunity for people to provide feedback. Does anybody ever say, for example, on the street, have you ever heard of anybody objecting to a home being designated?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, no, not typically. I've had questions, but not typically. I don't get any objections.
Yeah, I can't imagine why. I was just curious. Seems like a good thing to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reimer, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Murray. Through you to Monica. Question, Monica, about the back half of that lot, or 2 separate lots. Assuming that the same gentleman or the same owner owns both pieces of property, is there access to that, or how would he gain access to that property should he wish to develop it?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I had the same question. It's actually one property. It appears to be 2 separate properties,
okay.
but it's legally one property.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
There being no further questions, I have a motion moved by Councillor Miklick that committee receive and file for information report PD-29-25 regarding a notice of intention to designate for 2818 Prince William Street in Jordan Station. That committee acknowledge the cultural and heritage value of 2818 Prince William Street in accordance with Section 29(1) of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that committee directs staff to serve a notice of intention to designate attached as Appendix A for the property located at 2818 Prince William Street in Jordan Station as a property of cultural heritage value or interest following the requirements of Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. I will now ask our clerk to open that vote.
Thanks, Chair, and the vote's now open. Counselor Murray, Chair Murray.
Sorry, I didn't hit
That's
submit
okay.
button. My apologies. I clicked the button.
I'll close that vote. That
Thank you.
carries, Chair.
Thank you very much. We will now consider item 8.2.2, Report PD-31-25, Provincial Legislation Updates and Potential Impacts, Bill 60. The junior planner will provide comments. Ms. Tomeno, please go ahead.
Good evening. This report represents an information report regarding the recently proposed provincial changes to the Planning Act, as well as other acts, to expedite new housing development across Ontario. The bill amends a number of Planning Act regulations affecting official plans, minor variances, ministry powers, minister zoning orders, and protected major transit station areas. Generally, the bill aims to accelerate residential development through shortened timelines and standardize provincial procedures. Additionally, the bill makes amendments to the Development Charges Act to exclude land acquisition costs in the calculation of DCs and will mandate the creation of local service policies in an effort to increase transparency and alignment with community expectations. Notably, the bill also makes changes to the Construction Act regarding the application and release of holdbacks with the objective of easing possible tensions between developers and municipalities. Overall, the bill will have some impact on the town with regard to planning approvals and available funds for future capital projects. However, as anticipated by the province, it may incentivize developers to continue building despite current market and economic conditions. In recent years, the town has taken steps to introduce policy in line with provincial objectives. These prior changes will aid staff in the implementation of new amendments made by Bill 60. Notably, the province also proposes to further reduce municipal autonomy through increased authority for the ministry. This authority will grant the ministry permission to make decisions that do not align with the standards of the provincial planning statement. It is difficult to know how the ministry will impose these new powers. However, this proposal represents a significant deviation from the current planning framework and, in staff's opinion, undermines the legitimacy of the planning practice. Comments were requested by the Environmental Registry of Ontario, with the comment period lasting 30 days and ending on November 22nd. Planning staff submitted comments on behalf of the town on November 21st with concerns regarding the aforementioned changes, particularly regarding ministry authority. Bill 60 was passed in the legislature on November 24th and received royal assent on November 27th. It is important to note the speed at which Bill 60 was approved, as it was passed on its third reading just 2 days after the comment period's closing. The contents of the bill have been approved as initially proposed, with seemingly no changes made at the request of municipalities. And Matt will make some additional comments regarding official plans.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and through you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things to add. This one, like many other pieces of legislation proposed by the province, is interesting because you've got certain parts of it when you talk about, the non-regulating piece regarding MZOs. You talk about some of the as-of-right permissions now for variances. Those things are included and are actually moving forward and are now being put in place. But there's other pieces of this Bill 60 that are still open for education, for comments for the province. We don't know for how long because they have a tendency to provide a deadline and then go ahead with approvals even before that happens at times. But some of those are, and I think a few members of council have heard me speak about it previously, looking at official plans, looking to standardize those, looking for the province to have a little bit more control over how they're structured, what they look like, what's included within them. Also, when you look at some of the as-of-right variances that are now being granted by Bill 60, there was a regulation passed, as you see in the report, that allows for a variance as long as it meets 90% of the prescribed setback, and that applies to only setbacks right now with Bill 60, but they're in an education period for other zoning provisions that may apply to, or some form of that may apply to, when you look at things like lot coverages, maximum lot sizes, things like that. So broadening that flexibility, which when you look at how our Committee of Adjustment functions, that's a lot of the things that they hear. So there's a little bit of an impact to how that might generate or take away from the amount of applications that come before Committee of Adjustment. Elizabeth mentioned that we submitted comments, that's right, and the comments, generally speaking, are in line with this staff report. We did them just because, by virtue of having to go through this massive omnibus piece of legislation and trying to, evaluate, analyze, and figure out what the impact is at town, it took quite a bit of doing. So now we're before you, just providing a synopsis of what we perceive as potential impacts to the town. You see it laid out in the report, and we welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mayo and Matt. I see that we have quite a few questions in the queue, so we'll start with Councillor Miklick. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you to Matt and Elizabeth. Thank you for basically reading the instructions to this game that we're playing here called planning, and making sure we play correctly, because most of us, we don't follow the instruction. We just want to get to play as fast as we can. I have a question about setbacks and the minor variances. Matt touched upon it a little bit. Like, what is a typical, when Committee of Adjustment receives an application that comes for a variance, what's a typical currently? Because they're going to be as of right now, and you mentioned 90%. Like, is it 50%? Is it like 2 feet out of 4 feet? Is it 1.7? Like, what's a typical allowance for that sort of thing?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. That's a good question, and I understand why you're asking, Councillor, but it's a little bit of a more difficult one to answer. When you look at setbacks and, what we normally approve, it really does vary broadly, because there's a lot of local or site-specific circumstances that would impact that. How close is the adjacent building? What are some of the exterior features around the subject lands in question? And how would that impact what you're going to consider in terms of a reduced setback, for example? When you look at something like this regulation that's been put in place, where there's allowed a variation of, as long as what's proposed meets 90% of the zoning provision in place, I would say a lot of the planning applications we see might be around there, coming through Committee of Adjustment, but there's some that are greater than that, to be honest with you. And, the merits need to be decided not by just the number in terms of a comparison to what's permitted, but again, by what's around it and by what makes sense in that site-specific circumstance. So I know it's not exactly the answer you're looking for, but that's the truth of it.
Thank you. It's just, I get it that you have to have rules, you have to have numbers, but now we're hearing that there's going to be flexibility to that, which is understandable, but what degree of flexibility there is, it seems kind of open-ended still in my mind, and that might be of concern unless the province gives us a more firmer idea of what we can allow or what we should have a problem with. So that's why I bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miklick. Councillor Timmers, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Through to Director Bruder or Ms. Tamano, whoever wants to take it. So when I was reading through this report, I saw the comment that, growth is stalled and growth is slowing down, and then we're bringing these changes in to hopefully increase growth. But everything I'm reading throughout the report, it doesn't sound to me that it's actually going to increase growth. It seems like it's going to make it unpredictable. And I'm wondering, with all the things that are in the report, it talked about possible reduced DC revenue. So if we have reduced DC revenue, how are we going to support new development? So I guess my question is, with all of these factors, how confident are we in our current growth predictions, our forecasts? We're predicting out to 2031, but yet growth may be uneven or unpredictable across a municipality. Where we think there may be growth, there may not be. So I guess that's my question, like, how confident are we? Are we going to have to revise our growth numbers once this bill becomes in place?
Director Bruder, please go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and through you to the councillor. That's something we're looking at as well. I think the question is, it's not necessarily do we have to go back and look at the growth in terms of how much growth we're going to experience. I think a lot of it, too, has to do with when. These particular provisions that are put forth by Bill 60. I don't know necessarily if they're seen as the be-all and end-all of encouraging growth, but what they're meant to do is provide more flexibility, try to streamline and standardize processes to get things done faster, because the development community does say, you know, and it's true that time is money for them. The longer it takes to get through certain processes, the harder it is, because they have carrying costs, they have other pro forma needs that they've got to meet in strict timelines. But when you look at the developments in the pipeline, it remains as strong, you know, as we've been talking about it this whole time. And you're going to see later on this evening, I have a little bit of an update for you just on all things planning that speaks to that a little bit further. But it's more, you know, and it's not just Bill 60. We had Bill 17, which we'll talk about later, which kind of changes when we're going to be receiving development charge payments, even if development proceeds, now moving to occupancy. So it's kind of more not necessarily changing what the output could be, but it's changing the goalposts and where it moves towards and how long it takes. So that's what we're, you know, needing to take a little bit of a better look at, but there's a lot of things, quite frankly, that are outside of our control. When we look at, you know, some of the market indicators and some of the market drivers, these are things that extend well beyond Lincoln staff, even, you know, Niagara. So these are all things we're keeping an eye on for sure, and, you know, we're in constant conversations internally with our colleagues in finance, with our CAO, with our Public Works Department, all trying to make sure that our forecasts are as accurate as possible. But you're right, it's a very difficult exercise, and it's not being made easier by any of these things.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. So thank you, Director Bruder. So it seems that, yeah, the development that's being predicted will still come. It just may not come when we think, or it may take much longer than we think. I don't know if that would be a fair statement. So another question around the minor variances. I know we already just answered. I guess I have concerns around that. If they're as of a right, it means that you may be affecting your neighbors, or I just have concerns around that, but I know, you know, it is what it is if they bring it in place. There's a lot of questions here. Okay, one more, I'll move on. So, Chair, my last question is around the MZO orders. Okay, so what kinds of decisions, Director Bruder, can the ministry overrule? Like, regarding what types of development? Is that any type of development, or, you know, I'm just not understanding how that works exactly.
Director Bruder, please go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, and that's, I think, what a lot of us are struggling with in terms of us planners, other municipalities trying to decipher that one. It's an interesting piece in this Bill 60 now where the minister's afforded opportunities, including when they're considering things like MZOs, to kind of think outside of the realm of what applies from a provincial policy perspective, with obviously the exception of Greenbelt lands. That's the only one where they still have to comply. And when you look at the town as a whole, with, you know, the vast majority of our lands being occupied by Greenbelt, I guess you can take some solace there. But we don't necessarily know how this is going to be applied yet by the minister in terms of making decisions. Usually MZOs, you know, at least from experiences I've seen, they're put in place. They're moving forward major growth, major residential projects, trying to cut through maybe what some of the negative perception of those projects might be and move them along quicker, but they're very large typically in scale. I mean, I don't want to presuppose that that's going to be the only time where the province is going to consider making an MZO applicable. But again, it's very difficult right now to see exactly how the minister is or will intend to exercise these kind of new flexibilities that they're afforded. But again, I think it's, in terms of applicability here in the town, at least from, you know, our perspective at this moment in time, it seems relatively limited.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Timmers. Councillor Russell, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Director Bruder, again, along the same lines of Councillor Mikulik about the completely lost it. I'll come back in. Sorry.
Minor variances?
No, yeah, it was minor variance. That's right. Thanks, Councillor Timmers. Do we expect that, again, if there's a 90% as of right, that the overall volume going to the Committee of Adjustment is going to drop, or do we see this as a moving of the goalposts where if they know they can get 90% as of right, they're going to try going to 80% or greater? Any insight into that?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think there's going to be a little bit of that, Councillor, for sure. I think, it will wipe out some of these applications, because we do get a good number as well that, the variation is very minimal. You're talking a meter or less, sometimes difference for things like accessory structures. I'm just speaking generally. But, could this be used as an opportunity to maybe try to vie for a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more permissions through committee of adjustment? It is possible, yes. I could see that happening.
Okay. And again, wondering, maybe to the clerk, if the overall volume does decline quite a bit, what are the requirements as far as having that committee of adjustment meet with the regularity that they currently do? Will that volume be based on the number of applications coming through, or will it be based on, again, the other provincial requirements as far as meeting deadlines go? Any insight?
Through you, Madam Chair, maybe I'll start, and then if the clerk has anything to add, I'll ask her to chime in. Usually, we're not going to be, you're talking if, there could be a reduction in the amount of committee of adjustment meetings, that's possible. But generally speaking, we can't necessarily, like if we get an application, we have a certain amount of mandated time to process it, even if it's only one for an agenda, they still have to meet. So, it really depends on when the applications are received. If they're received and they're received in time for the next committee of adjustment hearing, then we will hold one to consider that application. But again, if there's a lull and there's nothing coming, then we can look at canceling meetings. And I see our clerk nodding, so I don't know if she has anything to add, but that's my answer.
No, that was good. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Russell. Councillor Patriva, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Mr. Bruder. Matt, so question, when I see things like may increase housing target requirements, support residential intensification, implementation of high and medium density development, is this giving the ability to developers that have already got approval on projects but haven't started the ability to come back and either make it higher or more dense based on these new figures? And my spidey senses would tingle and go, is this why we're not seeing these things happen? Because maybe they knew this was coming.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think, if a developer is looking at emerging legislation, they're going to see that, is there still strong support for that more compact built form, more density? Yeah, definitely, especially in certain designated areas. You saw in Bill 60 here, for example, in the projected major transit station areas. Now there's flexibility for municipalities to not have to go through things like official plan amendments, so long as they're not messing around with the minimum densities or things like that. So I think in that sense, yeah, a little bit, but keep in mind that option for them, for the developers, is always there, right? I mean, they can get their approval, land use, a couple of years go by, the market changes, they need to adjust to that and resubmit for a property. That's always available to them. In terms of, is this emerging legislation a piece or a reason why they haven't moved forward yet because they saw it coming? I don't think so. I think it's more on market conditions and some of the other things that are happening when you look at sheer costs of construction alone and the ability to sell homes of varying varieties. Those are big drivers too, because they affect the ability for developers to get financing. So I don't think so, but yeah, I mean, it certainly all contributes to it.
Okay. Second question, Madam Chair, if I may. So Matt, around DCs. So again, and I think the devil is in the detail. So one of the things that really jumped out to me, and I've got it standardized calculations. Is that to limit the fact that some municipalities actually pushed the envelope and tried to grab more than they actually were required?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think some of it has to do with differing approaches. There's a calculation that's called benefit to existing, right? And that goes into how you factor in what development charges are applicable versus what's the benefit to the existing development. I think there's a little bit of a differing of approaches to that between varying municipalities, and I think that's more the target of the standardized calculations that you're referring to. I think the province wants to provide a little bit more consistency and stability from the developer's point of view, which generally speaking would make sense. It's just, where it ends up going.
Sure, because that's one of the big things we hear is that the different scales based on municipalities. So if there was some standardization, it might be easier, right? It would level the playing field. It would make things more concrete, pardon the pun. A follow-up to the DC question, though. So this implementation of local service policies, is that not just wordsmithing? It's the same, is it not?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, that's a little bit of a non-issue for us. What it's saying is, there's some times where there's a development charge, but it's meant for a specific pocket of area. That's where the benefit is. That's where the development is in which that service is facilitating. What this is calling for is a little bit more transparency to make sure that there's policies put in place that allow for those local service charges to be enacted. Well, I can tell you the consultant that we work with for our development charges, Watson Economists, they already do those policies anyway, so it's a non-issue for us.
Yeah, so we're lucky we've got a good one.
Yes.
Doing that, okay. And third and final question, Madam
Fourth
Chair.
question, but I'm going to let it go.
Okay, you're awesome. I taught you well. And maybe a question to Mr. Graham. So around the establishment of the road construction standards, so Dave, that the MTO would establish these road construction standards going forward, and the municipalities would abide by them. We already follow the Niagara Peninsula standard contract. So is this, again, when to limit, not that we do it here, but, undersized roads or road widths to have some standardizations again? A lot of times when a development will happen and residents will move from, say, Brampton, Waterdown, things like that, where road widths are wider, and, ring roads and things like that. So will that all be established, going forward? Take team on that.
Yeah. Through the chair to the counselor, yes, I mean, I think that's the intent, is to be more consistent and have consistent standards.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I could add, Madam Chair, it's interesting timing too, because as we all know, there's been a lot of work that's gone on in the region about complete streets guidelines and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how the transitional policies come out in that regard. But generally speaking, Director Graham's right. It's all about trying to maintain a higher level of consistency.
Okay, terrific.
All right. Thank you very much, Councillor Patriva. Councillor Brunei, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Murray. Through you to Director Bruder. So Matt, we've got a lot of bills here. We've got all these acts. I think I counted 17 acts in this report. And the whole idea here is to aim to reduce delays. But as of mid-August, there was an article that stated that 30 of 50 of the largest municipalities in Ontario, including Toronto, had all fallen short of their growth targets up to 2024. So I mean, we can look at the impacts on Lincoln and what we're doing here in Niagara, but where are we going? Where are we going with this? I mean, the province is spending $1.2 billion to accelerate homes. Where is it being accelerated?
Through you, Madam Chair, and I think, I know exactly where you're going, Councillor, and it's a good point. When you look at pieces of legislation like this, it's an unfortunate thing, but it is the way it is, in that a lot of these are targeting those larger municipalities where there's a lot of that, most significant residential or general growth potential. If I look, generally speaking, when you talk about those larger municipalities that are falling short, I think that's exactly where a lot of the target is with these types of legislation. Obviously speaking, looking all over Southern Ontario and beyond to accommodate, more residential growth, but looking at some of those larger municipalities, I even hearken back to some other pieces of legislation, some of those where that required more development charges to be, a certain percentage to be paid out every year, so as a municipality doesn't build up a reserve. Things like that, that's not smaller municipalities like us. Those are larger municipalities. So to answer your question, I think where the province is trying to go is stimulate in those markets. I saw a report just recently, probably a number of you have seen it as well, just about the condo market in Toronto and what the sales have been this year. I think the amount of sales were in the 50s. Something like that, which is extraordinarily low. So, I think that's where the province intends to go more than anywhere else.
I appreciate that. Through you, Chair, if I could ask a second question. So Matt, bringing it closer to home then, you know, and the impact and what we're doing here as a municipality. At our recent ward meeting, there was a question asked by a business owner, you know, how is Lincoln, you know, making out, you know, on its growth targets? And we certainly know that we continue to look at things like promoting GO Transit. You know, obviously, we've got the transit hub intensification area that we talk about. We have the Prudhome's area, you know, Vineland CBD, and now the BDSS precinct. So how do we, on a market that's recessed right now because of debt and because of interest rates, you know, we had someone tell us at a lunch today that they're hearing from developers that nobody's going to put a shovel in the ground for condos till the end of 2027. How do we as a municipality prioritize where we're going to spend our money in terms of, you know, all these projects that we've identified? We've done an Ontario Street intensification. We've been talking about Vineland CBD. Prudhome's is on hold. So how do we as a municipality decide with no deadline on when GO is coming to Lincoln? How do we decide on what our prioritizations are to hit some of these growth targets sooner than later?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think we have to rely on the work that we've already done. You've heard me talk for years now about the background work we've done to identify not just where these specific sites are that are approved, but the general areas where we anticipate the most growth. And I still think that work that we've done rings true today, even though the timing might be a little different. When we prioritize where we're going to be investing, especially as it pertains to supporting growth, you have to look at those areas, like you mentioned, the Ontario Street Corridor, intensification corridor, that leads to a potential GO site, and then leads the other way down to a central business district. That's, in terms of investment, if you're looking to facilitate growth, that's the way to go. Those are the sites where you still prioritize. I think also, you know, when you look at the town as a whole, I think we've already been doing that moving forward. So I don't think the focus changes too much. I think certain things we have to be a little bit more open-minded to. I was talking with a couple of developers about this, and, you know, obviously the big thing, and it was mentioned earlier today, is timing. You know, how quickly can they move through processes, and that makes a difference for them. Looking at starting processes concurrently, which we already do, especially when it's not of you know, significant risk to them. Sometimes their site plans overlaps with their zoning, and it sounds like small things. But if we work with them collectively and we're troubleshooting and we're getting to a spot where we're moving forward kind of in more closer collaboration, that does make a difference as well. So there's no one good solution I can present to you, given, again, some of these market pressures that are well outside of our control. But those types of things are key. But I think in terms of where we prioritize, I think we've identified our areas, and I think we need to stick with them.
Through you, Chair Murray. So I appreciate that response, Director. So if we could go from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, you know, we have applications that have come before us, such as the bottom of Ontario Street in the interchange at the service road coming off of the Queen Elizabeth Highway. We know there's an application before of us at the bottom of Victoria Avenue in Vineland. We have an application going in front of the tribunal. So how do we, Director, how do we ensure to the resident that might be sitting here going, you know, this is a small town that is turning into a large town, how do we ensure that our growth is properly controlled? Because we don't know right now. There's so many, you know, unknowns, so many variables. And if all of a sudden we come out of this, you know, call it recession, whatever you want, 2027 to 2030, and all of a sudden there's a huge uptake, how do we control that?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think there's a few ways. I think, first of all, I think what you're alluding to is, you know, yeah, okay, things are kind of not paused, but slowed down for the moment. If they speed up again, maybe they come back and they're wanting more and more and more. I think what's important to note is we've done our homework as well. When we look at the areas where we encourage, or not encourage, but where we anticipate the most growth. We actually do, it's not just thinking about a build form and saying, yeah, I think that's good there. There's a lot of work that goes behind it as well from an infrastructure modeling perspective. Working with Niagara Region, there's capacity calculations and considerations we need to make. Those can be controls as well on a site. It's not necessarily always going to be unbridled growth to the nth degree. A lot of times there's going to be significant infrastructure investment, even to get to that next stage, should they want to come back and back and back. There is an upset limit with those types of things. Can they all be addressed? Yeah, but it's all about, it becomes a big cost perspective and working with various stakeholders. Just by virtue of that, generally speaking, I think that can be a control. We've also, you've seen it, you mentioned the one that's going to OLT. Well, there's an example of, I think, where our controls are working, because that's something where we are sticking more to what was envisioned there in the first place. This is outside of the areas that we've identified for the most strategic growth. So we're holding true to that. Finally, one other thing, and again, I was going to talk about this later, but I'll mention it now. It's interesting the way trends are going. I'm not even sure, at least for the next while, even if there is an uptake that is going to result in an nth degree density and built form. For example, I think a lot of developers now are considering different ways of doing things. Maybe it's going to be down zoning. Maybe it's going to be cutting costs and coming up with a product that moves better and quicker. And something maybe of a different housing tenure instead. Like they're trying to adapt to the market, and I think the market is changing, and it might be changing in a way that has some permanency to it for the next little while. Maybe not in terms of a slowdown, but in terms of what the market's dictating. So all those things together, and I think, I'm hearing what the concern is, but I do think there's mechanisms in place.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brunei. Mayor Easton, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. One thing that I wanted to share with council is that Director Bruder and I both provide information. I provide information that he gives to me in this form of analysis to the Planning Committee of AMO, that then reports impact statements and impact information from municipalities to the Premier's office. And this bill in particular, and the very, very limited consultation on this bill, the absolute limits that were placed on what could be commented on and what couldn't, were quite a shock to people, and there was a great deal of discussion about it. It hasn't gone over well. If people felt disenfranchised before, the way this bill has been handled is probably even the most difficult yet. So leads me to my first question to you, Mr. Bruder, through you, Madam Chair, is how are we going to take a great document? I must say Elizabeth did a very good job on this. I don't know how long she's been here, but she certainly came with some knowledge, that was for sure. So having this all consolidated in one document for us is one thing. What are our intentions in terms of going out and talking to the public about this extremely complex issue, when they may or may not even have an example of an application that they can attach their thoughts to? Because I think it's going to be a big miss. When official plans first came in, communities were never oriented to the process. And so we've had years of misunderstanding. How do we avoid more misunderstanding? We don't control any of this. We are the legislators. We're the ones that are to do the work and get it implemented. So how will we deal with this now? It is an opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I mean, that's something, Your Worship, that I've been struggling with a little bit, just because, to your point, really, when it comes to planning policies like this, what really resonates with members of the public is when they have something that they can coincide it with, something tangible, a development application. This means this for that. But here, it's easy to get lost in the kind of planning-ese language that's there. It doesn't make sense to a lot of people at face value. They don't even know how some of the things operate, nor should they. It's not their responsibility. But when you talk about things like development charges and benefit to existing and, stuff like, it's very hard for them to conceptualize because they don't see it every day. So I think what we need to bring forward is something that's a lot simpler, maybe focusing on what the key messages are, what they're going to, frankly, be seeing the most of. And maybe there's a way to do that. Maybe it's a series of public information sessions. But to be honest, this whole time we've kind of been waiting for the other shoe to drop in terms of, when do these updates stop so we can finally get to a pause and bring people up to speed cohesively on everything. Well, that doesn't happen because every time we turn around, there's a new bill coming to place. So I think, to your point, we have to kind of draw a line in the sand, so to speak, and maybe, in the past, we've held things like workshops, public workshops, to at least kind of try to walk anybody that's interested through the process. So we can look at doing things like that. Again, maybe it's a little bit more of a informed and consistent outreach. Just generally speaking, maybe there's a small blurb we can continue to put out there. We already have some on our online materials. Maybe we can make that more robust. We can utilize the channels we have, but to be honest with you, I don't have a great answer because it's something I continue to think about as well.
Sure, I understand that. Madam Chair, through to Mr. Bruder and possibly Mr. CAO, on the matter of a financial plan, are we at a point now where we can begin to look at the amount of infrastructure work that's been done? We know where the impact is to be felt, but could we begin for council to look at a new financial plan around matters that relate to elements of planning? They talk in here about credit merging for water and wastewater services. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like. There's all kinds of references to the eligibility of DCs. It would be important to know the state of our DCs. If someone came in as a third party and investigated, reviewed them, would we be in good shape? If somebody asked me, I would be very comfortable saying yes, only because I've heard from people who are in the know that they are in good shape. But what does that look like on paper? And a variety of other things like that. Now that we have a lot of infrastructure done and the state of the infrastructure is in quite good shape, what does that mean in terms of the value of the DC package in the future? And does that change now? That's some of the things that I think are overlaid on this. If you could give me a partial answer even.
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. In short, I think it's possible to bring an analysis like that forward with the caveat that, again, there's a big variable when it comes to something like timing of when certain development charges are coming in. You ask, relatively speaking, if someone to come in, are we in good shape? Well, again, that's all relative in terms of the work that needs to be done. We've done a lot of work. We already have a lot of good pieces in to accommodate a lot of our growth. Maybe it's more bringing that to the forefront in terms of demonstrating that a little bit more in terms of an analysis and plan. But it's definitely possible. Like I said, we do a lot of modeling, we do a lot of forecasting, so we do have that information we can draw from. But maybe on that, I'll turn it over to our CAO and see if he wants to make any comments.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the mayor, I think we need to look at what we control, what we can control, and I think what we can control is development charges, but that's within legislation, as you can see, and you're going to hear, you've already heard, but you'll hear moving forward. Even within that legislation, development charges becomes something difficult. We've talked about front-ending agreements when we think about financial sustainability and the tools, but I was having this conversation earlier today. Front-ending agreements are something council wants, something you've asked us to pursue. That does impact, though, DCs and when DCs come in, and so those two are very interrelated. It isn't just do a front-ending agreement. One then compensates the developer or the builder by providing a credit for the work that's done. So it may decrease debt, it may decrease those sorts of things, but what it doesn't necessarily address is cash flow and those other things. So there is really a fine balance we always talk about trying to ensure growth pays for growth. That is a hard pill to swallow. That's a hard pill to prove. We just want to make sure taxpayers aren't subsidizing development, but true growth pays for growth, remains very difficult. What I wanted to say before, and I think, you hear both spectrums or both extremes or both ends of the conversation here in some of the conversations and things that council has said so far. So you can't stop growth, but on the same side or the opposite side of that, you can't force it either. And so it will be about how we manage it. Director Bruder and I were talking about, how do you do that? So that's strong planning, that's making sure we've got phased servicing, that's addressing the financial tools that we're going to have to put in place to make sure that that happens, so that we address and, are able to, I think, match what the community wants from a long-term perspective, but also at the same time, control the things we can and not control, or try not to control the things that we actually can't control. And so the comment around, I think, how do you convince people that all of a sudden when the floodgates open, there's going to be too much development? There's things we can put in place to control that, but just like right now, when we're saying, well, we want more development so we can get more development charges, and how do we kickstart development? Those are two things that we can't control on either sides of those. So our job is to make sure planning, servicing, and those financial tools are in place so we can address that.
Okay, I think that's a decent answer, Madam Chair, because if we look at this document, which is less than ideal in terms of what it means to the public, it is an opportunity, and I think it's an opportunity for us to begin doing some of those things that the CAO has said. My last question is related to the piece on 170 around tenancy and the Residential Tenancies Act. The question, Mr. Bruder, is what do we know about tenancy in Lincoln? I know it's not a huge market, but what do we know about it in terms of the condition of these buildings, the condition that people are living in, and the kind of accountability that the Tenancy Act is intended to achieve?
Through you, Madam Chair, I mean, I can refer to all my time here when thinking about, my mind goes to what's been brought to our attention in terms of issues, maybe at certain buildings, whether it be, a rental building that's got multiple units, or maybe just somebody renting out one unit. We've had very few over the years, at least, that have been brought to our attention, that have been issues. That doesn't mean there isn't more out there that go unnoticed. As with any community, that's a strong possibility. But generally speaking, again, and you've heard me talk about it before, first of all, our overall rental stock is not particularly high. We're definitely skewed towards ownership. Most municipalities are, but us in particular, we haven't seen any major significant purpose-built rentals come through. A couple lately that have been decent size, but generally speaking, the accountability and the state of these properties seem to be relatively good from our experiences, at least from staff's experience.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mayor Easton. Councillor Miklick?
Thank you very much. Through you, thank you for one more question. Just like in hearing all of this and discussing all of this, like the name of this act is Bill 60, Fighting Delays, Building Faster. What do you see here that is fighting delays and building faster? What I see is fighting delays and approving easier. How do we make that turn into actually building faster? What do you see here?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think that's a fair assessment, to be honest with you. It's probably fairly well put, what you just said, Councillor, because, again, are there certain things that help, fight delays and make things more consistent and streamline things? I think there's a few in there that could be seen as positives for sure, but does that necessarily mean that all of a sudden everything's going to be addressed to the point where building can start happening faster all over the place? No. There's a lot of other factors outside this. This is one piece of the puzzle, so I don't know who thought of the name, but probably could have been better.
I appreciate that, because it just seems like with every one of these acts that comes our way, all these great ideas and well thought out and well-intended plans. It's a tremendous amount of work by you and your staff to try to decipher, try to figure out, and recalculate with finance all the implications. It's just, to me, it's frustrating. And I don't think I don't know if the province is really thinking about that when implementing, or how do they, or should they assist us with all of this, and with assistance, I mean, like, with finance. So that's why I bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Russell, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question. Director Brewer, you had mentioned that you spoke with some developers earlier, not today, but recently. Did they give an indication of what their average square foot cost needs to be in order for them to start building again, as far as retail goes? In our market, I know, again, not looking for a GTA quote, but like anything down here, like any indication of what the cost would have to be?
No, other than just saying a lot less. They haven't given me, a number that we need to hit or anything like that. Basically, when I do talk to them, their main points of focus, timing for sure. However, they do often say that working with town staff is generally, we are known for being fairly expedient compared to others. And then they say, generally for them, a lot of it is not even just the cost per square foot, it's the amount of sales too. It's what the home buyer's perception of the market is. That's another big factor that they tend to stick with a lot when they're talking to me about the challenges they're having, because again, if it's not a purpose-built rental, it means they need to achieve 60-70% sales to be able to move forward with financing. And there's just not buyer confidence given the global and geopolitical issues that are there. So they really play heavy on that one when we're talking. Obviously too, they talk about cost of construction and things like that and land costs. But they have commented lately now that some of those things, land costs a little bit, trades maybe a little bit more, they're starting to see some movement there. Will it get down to where, it was, so to speak, when the industry was booming? I don't think so, but really it's a lot about buyer confidence.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachariva that committee receive and file for information report PD-31-25 regarding provincial legislation updates and potential impacts, Bill 60, Fighting Delays, Building Faster Act 2025, and that committee directs staff to submit report PD-31-25 to the province to represent formal comments from the town with respect to Bill 60, Fighting Delays, Building Faster Act 2025. I will now ask our clerk to open that vote.
Thanks, Chair, and the vote's now open. Yes. Thank you. And that carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now consider item number 8.2.3, report PD-30-25, implementation of short-term accommodation business licensing 2025 update. Our Director of Planning and Development will provide comments. Director Bruder, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly for council, just wanted to provide some input and tell you how it's going, kind of our first year of running this program. You see the total number of licenses applied for to date, the number's 84. When I hearken back to when we were looking at our forecasting numbers, when we were considering the MAT tax implications that come along with this, in 2024 and 2025, we envisioned receiving 20 and 40 applications respectively. So we've already exceeded that in the first year. 2026 looks to, again, our projections looked at an additional 60 applications. So I think what I want council to gain from that is that we are trending exactly or a little bit more in terms of uptake than we thought we were going to, which I think is good news. Another good thing, when you look at the report and you look at some of the things that have come out of the licensing network to date, we've been able to work with a lot of operators. It is true that it's been a little bit difficult in terms of processing at first, a lot of incomplete applications, a lot of applications submitted where maybe there were some issues on the property, could be building code, fire code issues, whatever the case may be. But generally speaking, when you look at the total number, there's only been a couple that we haven't been able to get to resolution on. I think it shows good troubleshooting, but it's also bringing the issues to the forefront, which I think is important because now, these if we didn't have this framework, then those issues may not have come to the forefront in the first place. So I think we're addressing what we need to address. When I look at some of the other things, though, I look at the amount of complaints that came into our municipal law enforcement department. We only had 3 in the past year, which is pretty low, which shows the compatibility between these operations and adjacent properties seems to be fairly positive. I think, again, the framework seems to be doing its job. We have requirements in there that pertain to making sure someone's around and accountable for the most part. That must be working. That's what I take from that. We also have some proactive measures that our MLE department is taking. When you look at, there have been a number of orders issued, 26 of them, and that was all for advertising without a license. So what that is that's our MLE officers making sure that they're utilizing the platforms available to them to identify where there is issues, issuing orders and working towards compliance. Have they all been addressed? No, but a number of the orders have been addressed, which again shows positive progress. So, I mean, generally speaking, wanted to provide this report, give you a little bit of statistical information, but otherwise give you the comfort that it seems over the past year or so that the licensing framework is functioning as intended. However, there is a significant, staff resource component to this just by virtue of having to walk a lot of applicants through the process and those types of things. You look at the number of inspections from our fire department, the number is pretty high. So it's a lot of man hours involved, but it is a positive outcome. You saw the total number that we show in here. It's 140 and change as short-term accommodations that we know of, so there's still a ways to go. We knew that, and that number I wouldn't get too hung up on because it really varies. It could vary seasonally, some opening, some closing, and just by virtue of the shifting market in that regard as well. So just providing those high-level comments. I'm happy to take any questions from council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Bruder, and I see that Councillor Renchman has jumped in, so we'll start with you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mary, and thank you for the report, Director Bruder. It's been a while since we discussed the MAT tax and the whole discussion of having licensing Airbnbs, licensing short-term accommodations, and one of the things we discussed at the time when we were looking into this is how one of the justifications for doing so was that we were potentially concerned about the short-term accommodation market having an effect on the rental market. So can you remind me what we put in place to offset that and ensure that that's not happening? That we're not seeing rental units being converted over to short-term accommodation to a greater extent than we would like to see.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Kind of the big ones were the principal residency requirement that we put in place in the urban areas, meaning that needs to be the actual residence of the person that's running the short-term accommodation operation, but secondly, limiting the number within the town for each particular operator to 1. So those 2 things there alone kind of limit the ability or the opportunity for the short-term accommodation market to overtake the kind of longer-term housing rental stock or longer-term housing that we want to make sure we preserve. So those are the main components we put in place.
Okay, thank you. And a question of clarification, Madam Chair. So are we aware of anyone coming forward for a license and saying, well, it's currently a rental, I live in the house, I have a basement apartment, I'm renting it out to somebody, but it's more profitable for me to have a short-term accommodation there. Are we aware of a situation like that? And I just want to comment on what you said earlier on. I have heard people say that, yeah, I have an Airbnb next door, and actually I like what's going on there because there's people coming and going, but there's oversight and the owner's taking care of the property. So just a comment on that.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. We haven't heard any of that. Usually, the ones that we've been getting, the vast majority, they've been operating already for a little while, and this came in place while they were operating, so now they need to come into compliance. So a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them weren't new. They were already established, but it's not something I've been hearing in terms of, this is more lucrative than a longer-term rental, so we're going to go this way instead. It's not a trend that I've been made aware of.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Pachariva, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Murray. And again, Matt, thank you for the update with respect to the STAs. Question, so we're working through the 84, and you detailed where we are on that. So is the game plan then to proactively go after the difference between the 149 and the 84 in next year?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Definitely, like, that's where we're looking at things like, a lot of them need to be advertised to gain business. They're on those platforms. That's some of the orders that I was mentioning. That's part of that process. We're going to continue with that. And obviously, too, you know, we haven't heard any complaints about our operations really, other than the 3. And the 3 were really more about like compatibility impacts, not about one running illegitimately. But, you know, we'll obviously rely on those as well. You can try to keep an eye out when you're patrolling on the roads, but it's kind of hard to be able to decipher. So a lot of it is just looking at the advertising.
Platforms.
Yeah.
Okay, and follow-up, Chair. So the 26 scofflaws that we've identified, and they've got 1 month in order to come into compliance. And you said you're successful on some, but we're working with the others. What's the penalty for non-compliance? Is it monetary? Is it like,
Through you, Madam Chair, it's monetary, and it can compound too for the longer that they're operating in non-compliance. So we do have that as leverage for sure.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and a third item, and this is one of the things that I found interesting when, you know, we were entering down this road, and the pushback from some of the operators that things were too onerous. And one of them was about, you know, with the chief sitting there in the front room, was fire safety. Like, if you're going to operate a business, you need smoke alarms, you need carbon monoxide, you need extinguishers, you need an escape plan, because God forbid something happens, you need to get those people out. So I'm glad that that has come front and center, and would like to give a hats off to the chief and the department for identifying this, because that, I mean, that's paramount. I mean, you know, you're operating a business, you want to keep your customers safe. So just the, you know, the perceived onerous or onerosity of that, fallacy?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's not something we've been hearing a lot of feedback on. I think our colleagues from the fire department are pretty efficient at taking care of what needs to be taken care of. Also, if you remember, we did provide a little bit of flexibility if the occupants were 4 or less too, so that helps too.
Okay. Thank you. I will clean up my vernacular. Thank you, Councillor Bernay.
Cleaning it up might be an onerosity kind of a thing.
Yeah, well, I might just add it to the lexicon.
There you go. Councillor Mikulik, your turn. Please do go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you to Matt. I just, I'm going to follow up. I'm going to add a little bit to some of Councillor Patriev's questions. And it was something I brought up when this was all occurring, and, you know, when would somebody get a fine? When is that, how many fines have we implemented? How many, when, we've set a speed limit, or, you know, in this town, you know, you need a driver's license to drive a car. People are driving, if you drive a car without a license, you get a ticket. But it seems like, in this case, I'm seeing or I'm hearing that people are operating without a license and they're not getting a ticket. So when will we start actually write tickets? Because if, and this is something I brought up, I personally, I would try to go as long as I can without getting one of these licenses, because as long as I don't get a license, I don't have to worry about paying for the license, and I don't have to worry about paying the MAT tax. That's 4%. So I feel sorry for the people that have already been above board, done their homework, did everything right, and they're having to pay. To me, I'm just, so the question is, when are we going to write it? When are we going to start handing out these fines?
Through you, Madam Chair, well, you'll notice, like, again, going back to the amount of orders, usually an order is kind of a prerequisite to issue levying charges, right? Like, you, again, the whole purpose of municipal law enforcement, I know everybody would like sometimes just issue a fine and be done with it, but we're not supposed to be punitive. We're supposed to work towards compliance first. And we heard that loud and clear from the operators and indicated, in fact, during the process that we would try to do that to the best of our ability. So what we do is we issue an order, and then we typically provide a compliance date. Could be a month, could be 2 months, again, depending on, you know, what the issue is at hand. If it's just advertising without a license, generally speaking, we give them 30 days to get their application in. And like I said, we've already we've had a number of those orders come through where they did, and we're processing the license now. I think what you're saying is, well, you know, yeah, that's great, Matt. You got 84, you know, license applications in, but there's another, you know, 60 or whatever the number may be out there that hasn't applied yet. Well, that number is still working. It's a work in progress, but, you know, again, you can see by virtue of the orders being put out there that our MLE department is following up with those that aren't operating with a license, and we are taking action. So, you know, if they fail to comply with the order within the prescribed timeline and there's, you know, no earth-shattering reason why that happened, then we would levy charges. But we haven't had to do that yet, and for the ones that we still need to track down and we still need to approach and get them to work through the process, we're working on it.
Okay. I think it's important, otherwise there's no incentive in my mind from what I can see, and I'm just being totally honest here, like, you know, as if I was an Airbnb operator operating legitimately, there's no incentive to really act quick on this, especially when there's these scofflaws that they must know that they're not going to have to pay unless they actually get that ticket, or that fine. And then with respect to the application itself, we went out of our way to make this as easy as possible, all this education, all these workshops, consulting with everybody involved, speaking to other Airbnb owners in other municipalities that have reviewed ours. They said, wow, this is an easy application. Just a hand-drawn parking lot sketch is all you need, and you don't have to worry about the septic and all this. And yet, it seems like we have a relatively high number that are just having a hard time getting approved. Do we need to relook this to make this easier yet to get these Airbnbs approved? I mean, how long does it take? It shouldn't, if I was to get a fine, $1,000, you bet I would make a faster, quicker effort to get my property approved, rather than just stall it, delay it, not pay it. So do we need to relook at this bylaw to make it easier?
To you, Madam Chair, I mean, we can always look at ways to improve things, for sure. I don't think that's necessary at this time. A lot of the reasons for, you know, things being delayed, first of all, the massive influx you get when you implement a program like this and having minimal staff to be able to deal with it, that's one. And we knew that going in, quite frankly. But the other is also the quality of materials coming in. And it's not even just with this. We have that with planning applications. You know, sometimes people make a submission and things aren't where they need to be for a variety of reasons. Maybe the chief's staff aren't getting what they need from the fire safety plans, or there's something wrong with the parking plan from an accessibility point of view. All these things can factor in, and a lot of them require back and forth to address, and some of it takes some time. So, you know, for all those reasons combined, that can be the source of some of the reasons why there's some outstanding applications. But generally speaking, I think we've moved past what the big bubble is when we first initiated the program. And, you know, we're getting better as we go as well. And we're getting better at informing applicants and instructing applicants and walking them through things as well. So I think we're starting to see a little bit more of an optimization now. But you're right, we always need to evaluate, and if there's a need to streamline and make it even easier somehow, although I would tell you this is already easier than just about any other framework that I've seen, but we can still look at it.
Thank you, and thank you, and that's what I thought, but like, when I hear or I'm reading that it's 2 to 4 hours for a fire inspection, I don't even think it takes that long to do a whole home inspection. So that leads me to wonder, like, how stringent is, let's say, that piece to this bylaw, that 2 to 4 hours. I mean, that to me, you know, generates questions in my mind as far as the ease to which this application process is, or the ease to which the operators are just choosing not to buy into this program. And the cost to us as a municipality with the MAT revenue as well as the license themselves. So I think we got to get on it. Thank you.
I see no other counselors in the queue, but I do have a question for you, Councilor Bruder. I mean, Director Bruder. I do know that when we've gone to AMO and Roma, Airbnb is often in the room at the trade show talking about how they want to work with municipalities and partner with them. My understanding is that if they know that a municipality requires registration or licensing, then they will require them to post their license number on there. Does the town of Lincoln work with these platforms like BRBI and Airbnb to ensure that they know that, hey, if you're within the town of Lincoln, you need to be putting a registration number in there? Like, what is the relationship that you guys have with those organizations?
Yeah, certainly, Madam Chair. We do work with them. That's where we get the numbers from. The data that they can provide sometimes isn't necessarily helpful in determining exactly where they all are, but we do get that information, and they do also let all the operators know that there's a license here, and also if they do have a license, they require them to post it as well, because that helps us, like I said, with our proactive enforcement. So we do have that relationship, and we work quite well with them back and forth.
And then just a follow-up to one of Councillor Miklick's questions. So again, as you said, 104, we think ballpark, depending on what day you're looking at it, about 149 operators, 84 of them within the process. Is there an expectation eventually that there's going to be 149 listings on one of those platforms, and there's that many licenses as well? Like, is the expectation that everyone is going to be licensed? And if so, what's the time frame that we're looking at for that?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think we forecasted out a number of years. Remember, I think it's important for context, we're in year one of implementation of this thing. If you expect every single operator to be licensed right away in year one, I think you were going in this with the wrong, assumptions. It takes a little bit of time to get everyone on board. I know not quick enough for some. Generally speaking, is the goal to obtain as high of a percentage as possible of those operating to be licensed? Absolutely. Will it ever get to 100%? I mean, I would challenge any municipality that's got one in place that says they've got 100% compliance with any bylaw, but that's what we strive for, absolutely.
Councillor Petruba, you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick one too. And I hearken back to attending one of the sessions at AMO on short-term accommodations and Tiny Township. I mean, our people are getting a heck of a deal because I think they were charging $2,000 a year. So, going forward to try to get that compliance up, might want to let people know what other municipalities are charging, right? We are giving them, what's the word? Bottom. I've got my, I want to say, I've got my, language police over there. Basement barrel deal on this. So, just going forward, why you should be signing up, right? Yeah. Because, and about the, the cases that they had there and you need to be part of this in order to go forward. So, and the benefits of the benchlands and your advertising and with their events and the tie-ins, right? There's a lot of things to be gained from it, so. Thank you, Chair.
You are so very welcome. That is the end of the queue that I see, so if there are no further questions, I have a motion moved by Councillor Russell. The committee receive and file report PD-30-25 regarding the implementation of short-term accommodation business licensing 2025 update. I will ask our clerk to open the vote.
Thanks, Chair. The vote is now open. Thank you. I'll close that vote. That carries. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now consider item 8.2.4, Planning and Development 2025 Year in Review. The Director of Planning and Development will now provide a presentation. Director Bruder, please go ahead. Come on.
All right. Good evening, members of committee and council. If you recall, I did this last year. We come to the end of another calendar year. I think it's important to bring forward some trends, some statistical information as it pertains to the planning department, showing you how things have been going and how we see them progressing from here. So really, just from an overview perspective, we'll look at departmental structure just very quickly, so you can see the team again. We'll break down some of the legislation, a lot of which we've already talked about, so we'll try not to get too far into details there. But more importantly, looking at development trends, some of which we've talked about, looking at where our planning application statistics are, building department statistics, and then looking at some housing data, some of which, again, you saw a little bit of it last year, but I felt it important to bring it up again and maybe talk about it a little bit because we continue to see the evolution of where the market conditions are and how they relate to the town of Lincoln's scenario. And then we'll end with some project initiatives that staff have been working on. So just quickly looking at our team here, you can see there's not much change that there was last year. We've got a couple positions that continue to be vacant. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. One important addition that I'm happy about that we've got on board, looking at our GIS and asset management specialist. We've had that position available to us for quite some time. Deferred filling that position, but now we're at the point where we have, and it's already paying dividends just from the virtue of our GIS systems and optimizing that, just not for internal use between various departments, our fire department, public works, planning, but also even the public interface component, and providing kind of a better window for residents to access mapping information. Skipping to some provincial legislation changes. You heard about a couple, and I'll talk about them in a minute, but really the theme has been, we talk about, standardizing and streamlining, speeding things up, but another kind of trend that we're seeing in some of this legislation is looking at the increased responsibilities now that are being afforded to lower tier municipalities, and I'll get into what that means as we talk about each of these. Bill 17, I won't go through this in too much detail as you've heard me talk about it before, but some of the big ones here are obviously looking at the timing of when development charges are paid, more opportunities to enter into early payment agreements for developers, builders paying at occupancy instead of at building permit issuance, which can be the difference of a few years. So that's a very significant change. You look at changes to the building code, there's a little bit more standardization. Now there isn't an opportunity for municipalities to kind of develop their own additional standards over and above building code. I'm thinking about green building standards and things like that. So there's a reduced scope there. And then changes to the Planning Act. This one's more on what constitutes a complete application, the minister having some control over that, and really the province prescribing more on what we need to accept and from whom when it comes to site-specific studies and reports and things that are coming with development applications. Bill 60, we talked about this one at length. I don't think I need to go over this in too much detail, but again, there seems to be a trend towards trying to standardize processes. One of the things that really stood out to us again is when you look at the minister and the minister's ability now to kind of go outside of what provincial planning legislation would otherwise say. That's a big one. And a question came up tonight. Well, how is the minister? How do we see that unfolding? That's going to be key. We don't know, but that's something we're going to keep a close eye on moving forward. This is an interesting one. It's still just proposed, hasn't been enacted yet. I don't know when it's going to happen, but there has been some communication coming out from the province on consolidation of conservation authorities. And this is interesting because I've seen what the draft mapping looks like, and we would fall under a much, much, much larger area. Instead of just being, more or less in Niagara in this area, now we would expand all the way north and west, Orangeville, inclusive of Hamilton, Burlington, Oakville, Milton, like a lot of big municipalities. So obviously my concern with that would be, well, is it going to be similar to other, large governing bodies where they cover such a big geographic area, yet it's not properly staffed, and it's hard to get support for things and answers to questions as needed. It could be a little bit of a resource issue. I don't know. I don't know what that modeling looks like and what the end result will be. But I do know up until now, the NPCA has been steadfast that it's business as usual until they hear otherwise. So just bringing that to your attention because it is something that's kind of percolating as we speak. Bill 23, so finally, March this year, the Niagara Region planning responsibilities were removed from it. And that has a pretty significant impact to us, especially timing-wise, because we were getting pretty far along the line where we were finalizing our official plan that we're updating. And then this came around at the end of March. And really what this means now is the Niagara Region official plan and all of its policies that are applicable to the town have to be assimilated into our official plan. So that's been taking a lot of work. And you'll recall we're doing our official plan in-house. We have not retained a consultant. So going through and making sure all the relevant policies are included. Some aren't relevant. They're more, still on the regional side when you think about regional infrastructure and things like that. We've been working through that. You see, otherwise, Niagara Regional staff, they had kind of approval authority for a variety, or not approval authority, but they would assume responsibility for and had memorandums of understanding with municipalities for things, environmental impact assessments, archaeology, things like that, where they were kind of more the one that was providing sign off on those issues. Well, not anymore. We can still retain them to obtain support upon request, but now this falls on us to review and make sure everything's worthy of approval. So pretty big changes coming along with Niagara Region losing its planning responsibilities. But with Bill 60, I don't know if anybody saw it, when it comes to community improvement plans, that reinstates the ability of the region to at least put them in place, which is good news because Niagara Region is currently working on incentive programs for things like rental housing. So they're still going to be able to move forward with that. Okay, general development trends. As I mentioned before, still a high level of market uncertainty. A lot of external factors at play. As you can see here, there's been a decrease in both the amount of homes sold and the average prices in Niagara Region. That's continued from last year, continues to be a trend. There was a slight bump up this year in April, and then the downward trend continued. And again, that's being driven by a bunch of things. There is higher cost of building materials and construction. Tariffs are playing a part in that. There's also, when you look at the general, just still high prices of homes and looking at what might be coming down the line, everybody that's looking to purchase a home is saying, okay, there's a HST that now has been eliminated, but what's next? What's next? Because there's constant conversations on how the market needs to be stimulated. So there's a lot of kind of speculating, well, what's going to happen next? Maybe we should wait for that, whatever it is. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and that impacts the developers, obviously. But there's been a number of them. Don't want to say which ones yet, because they haven't formalized what their plans are, but they're looking to pivot a little bit. Some of those with more compact built forms, higher densities, they're looking to switch maybe. They're going to bring their densities down a little, and they're going to get rid of some of those high cost items of their developments when you think about underground parking, things like that are a major structural cost. I'm trying to eliminate that and maybe move towards a purpose-built rental, which is important. You've heard me say, from a financing perspective, purpose-built rentals are different. You don't have to achieve a percentage of sales for funding for that. Instead, it's a mortgage that goes through CMHC that does the vast majority of all rental mortgages in the country. So it is a change in the type of funding that can be available, which can be of benefit to developers. So we are hearing that more and more, that there is kind of that movement afoot. The challenge with that is a lot of these developers that are contemplating it, they might not necessarily be in the landlord business. So there's involved more partnerships and things and more relationship building amongst them that then we're hearing from. So otherwise, I look at a site like Prudham's. You've got a site there that's got a variety of built forms. Right now, their objective is they're trying to get as close to shovel-ready as possible for a few different built forms. You've got the singles, they're already there. They might be looking at a site plan for a townhouse block. They might be looking at their building beside the Tim Hortons, the mixed-use building, and trying to get that forward for potential start if everything works out in the spring. So you're seeing a lot of positioning to try to diversify housing offerings to respond to the market changes as they occur, trying to be as nimble, as flexible as they can. So an overview of planning applications in 2025. You can see there was less this year than last year. We've got 147 this year. Some of the big ones to notice was there's significantly less consent applications than they were. Committee of Adjustment, which I'll talk about in a second, generally less applications there. More site plans, which kind of reflects the ebb and flow. You see development applications, they go through their land use permissions, their zoning, things like that to get those in place. Those are approved by all of you. And then they go into their detailed design, their site plan process. And we saw a little bit of an uptick compared to last year, and some of them significant too. So, you know, that's a little bit representative of just where developments are in the process. But you look at our zoning amendments that are coming through the pipeline, there isn't many at the moment. A lot of them are getting, they're advancing in the detailed design stages, the ones that we have in the pipeline. So, you know, there is a little bit of a decrease compared to 2024, which was a good year, generally speaking, compared to most years, not even for the past few. So I would take that number with a grain of salt, but generally speaking, we're seeing all throughout Niagara and beyond, there's not many municipalities that are exceeding numbers from last year. That's just the way the year has been. Committee of Adjustment trends, as I mentioned, the applications have been less. Mostly the consent applications have dropped off. Again, that's something that I don't know necessarily if that's impacted as much by market conditions as it's just the timing of things and when individuals come forward and what they're looking for. It can be, but it's also, these consent applications happen for a variety of reasons. We could very well see an uptick. Again, it could be just a blip. And there tends to be a little bit of a cyclical nature of those too. Otherwise, you know, the amount of minor variance applications, that's, you know, not too far off from what was the year prior. So additional resource requirements for applications. So I broke it down last year and I gave just a little snippet here in terms of amount of staff time for simple applications. This is among a number of staff, right? Because every application could potentially touch a variety of people that need to be involved from a servicing perspective, entrance perspective, built form and urban design perspective. It really depends on the application. So it can result in quite a bit of hours spent. But on top of this, 2025 saw the introduction of 2 new application processes that also require staff resources from varying departments, including planning, which is short-term accommodation business licensing and our new private property tree bylaw that just came in September. Now for that one, we haven't felt the full brunt of it yet resource-wise because we're still in that early, kind of same idea as we did with the short-term accommodations, providing that initial education period for everyone to become acquainted with the bylaw. But again, those are 2 new resource requirements that we didn't have before moving forward. So it's important to note. And then, you know, on the engagement front, also wanted to highlight this because I think, you know, it's evident when you look at the application, for example, at 5205 King Street, that's going to be brought to OLT and all the engagement that goes around that. This is not mandated engagement. This is additional engagement over and above what's required. And I'm not saying that to say that we have an issue doing it. I'm just saying that staff are very involved with the community. You know, I know there's always more involvement that would be desired, but I can tell you that that engagement takes a lot of time as well, and it's not necessarily legislated. And we try to do it as much as we can to get towards solutions on a variety of development applications and other things that come before our staff. So on the building permit numbers, the number of building permits issued was 249. So still a fairly substantial number. The residential, new residential units, the majority of these were for single detached dwellings. There was 39. Again, that's less than it was last year, substantially. But we did get some other pretty big building permit applications, and that's why you see this point about, even though the permit numbers are down a little bit, the revenue was pretty much in line with what we forecasted for the year. We had some big ones come through, a couple big agricultural greenhouse applications that drive a pretty big building permit revenue. We had the school come in. We had the hotel on Ontario Street. We had Moyer's Apples. These are all pretty big drivers. And it just goes to show you that if you get 1 or 2 significant developments that come up in any given year, that makes a big difference. So, you know, I know we're talking about unknowns with timing, but if some of these come forward, you can see a pretty big uptake relatively quickly. So this is some of the information that I presented last year. This is more the housing as a whole and what the forecasts look like for us. So as of right now, a little over 9,500 residential units in the town of Lincoln, roughly speaking. That's based on our latest census data. You can see the big skew towards singles. And then when we look at where we're going to go, our forecasting, Councillor Timmers, you mentioned it, goes out to 2051. Well, you look at, there's 9,800 new units that are expected. And for the most part, they're forecasted out to be medium and high density. And when you look at what's gone through the development pipeline over the last number of years, over the term, I think you can see that that trend's holding true. This would mean on average, if you parsed it out equally from now until 2051, it'd equate to about 327 new dwelling units added annually. So, this year obviously didn't get there, but we're not getting there often. We've done it a few times in the past decade. But again, I think what's more important to note, and we can go into it a little bit further, is some of the other sites that are still to come online that we haven't seen any development concept for yet. So even the ones that are in the pipeline, there's more. So again, looking at the residential permits, there's 39 issued. It reflects a difficult housing market for sure. Last year our number was higher, but it was largely driven by the Benchmark development up on Mountain Street because they pulled all their permits. So again, this goes to show you any one development comes forward and the numbers look a lot different. So you can take that with some optimism for any given year just by virtue of all those applications that I've said are fairly close to being finished. The design process is just when they come forward. So looking at the pipeline a little bit further, I could say there's a little better now than 6,000 approved dwelling units that are in the pipeline. That means they've got their land use permission. It doesn't mean that their site plan's done, but they've gone through a land use permission process, or they were already permitted, or we did it by virtue of our secondary plans or what have you. So if you took that number alone, forget some of the other big sites, like for example, the GO Transit Station area and the lands around there that could be developed, that's not included in here. This alone would equate to about 222 units per year. Again, it's all about timing. I'm just trying to give you some context on forecasts and where we're at, relatively speaking. You see here, to get to that annual rate of 327 units per year, we need to add approximately 2,800 additional units in the town. I can tell you easily, with infills that are available, with, again, the GO Transit Station area, with some of the other sites along Ontario Street that haven't been developed, with a potential Vision Vineland that we can talk a little bit more about later, it wouldn't be too difficult to get to that number at all. And that's why the forecast was as it was when we were working through it with the region, because we did see that growth. And by recognizing the possibility for that, it wasn't to encourage that per se, but make sure that we're prepared for it if it happens. So you can see a little bit here in the housing in the annual comparison since 2015. You can, obviously those two spiked years, those are some pretty crazy years, and we've had some other big ones in between, but there can be an ebb and flow from year to year, and it can vary greatly. I know a lot of people like to say, well, we're a small town, we're becoming a big town. Well, not necessarily, because if you look at this, take for example, development by New Horizon, let's say. Say they came in just by themselves next year and they pulled building permits. Well, you'd be up higher than you were in 2024 from just one development. So, I mean, you need to take these numbers with that context, but I think what it does show you is there is naturally a little bit of a fluctuation that happens over the years. A lot of it, planning applications have different complexities. It takes a while for them to get even to a point of submission for some of their detailed design. So all those things contribute to kind of this circulatory nature of these numbers. So looking at some operational efficiencies that we've been undertaking, and we do that obviously just because they're good things to do. Moving forward, you try to make sure you streamline, you operationalize, you improve, but also in recognition, I think we need to operate as efficiently and as cleanly as we can. So first of all, you can see that we've been leveraging our software installations heavily, that we've invested in, and now they're bearing fruit. Now we've got digital intake software in for not just building permit applications. We've got it for planning. We're going to take that and we're going to apply it maybe to some of those other resource draws that we're experiencing, something like a private property tree bylaw application, trying to digitize and automate submission intake as much as we possibly can. So making good use of that software. You see above there, we're also, and we've talked about this before, we're nearing launch for our G-Techna MLE ticketing software, which will provide really significant operational improvements, automation of file keeping, remote ticketing that automatically populates file keeping, reduces staff time there, and reduces kind of that, the tediousness of some of those things. And finally, well, not finally, but in 2025, the planning, we operated lean. We had 2 extended staff vacancies. We had one in our building department, one in our planning department, and an additional one that we didn't fill that was on maternity leave, a senior position. Again, recognizing the way things have been over this past year. Those positions obviously still available with Melissa coming back in January too, which is going to be a huge help to us. As you'll see in the next slides, we have a ton of work to undertake over the next year. But in addition to that, we went through the budget process and there was an additional FTE removed. One that came over to the planning department through some organizational changes that happened previously. And that's been one that we've permanently said, well, for the time being, we can proceed without. So again, looking at opportunities just to make sure that we're making best use of the resources available to us. It's a heavy workload, but I think it gives you some perspective on some of the thoughts and considerations the staff have made. Finally, and you've heard me talk about this before, we're undertaking a lot of things internally that a lot of other planning departments don't, to be honest. When you talk about our official plan update, you talk about this Vision Vineland undertaking, you talk about, and we've been looking to try to initiate some initial conversations with property owners on our Heritage Conservation District. Like, these are all things that we're trying to do internally. For one, I think it bodes well for staff. It's good to have them involved in it and hear firsthand from the stakeholders involved, but also, again, to try to be as efficient as possible. So ending with the key projects and initiatives that either we started working on, are working on, continue to work on next year. Our business licensing, we've talked about that. Our private property tree bylaw, implementing that. Again, I talked about our in-house expertise. We continue to optimize our GIS platforms. That also has implications from an asset management point of view. So there's corporate support factor involved there. Heritage designations, you've seen quite a few notice of intention to designate come forward, more than ever before, I think, at least since I've been here. So we're really working hard. Our Heritage Committee, along with Monica and staff's been doing a great job getting those moving forward. A lot of consultation to obtain buy-in from property owners. You mentioned, Councillor Rinchima, that it's a good thing to have a property owner either initiate or be involved or be good with that process, and they have been. Official plan update. I told you that's been onerous to say the least, with all the policy changes and the region losing its planning responsibilities, but we are nearly there. We're looking very soon, hoping to target immediately in the new year to bring that forward for your consideration. We're finally there. I'm sure staff are going to be very, very happy when we can get that to the point of implementation and approval. Vision Vineland, we did an initial landowners meeting earlier this year. The idea now is to move forward with the broader community. We're developing some materials for some more public information sessions. Initially, our goal was to do it, before the end of the year. We're going to try to squeeze that in, but we're getting close to Christmas. It might be early in the new year. And then still continuing the work on our urban tree canopy. Now we're looking at, our overall urban forest management strategy and best practices that we're trying to consolidate and get together to inform future processes. And that's it. And with that, I welcome any questions or comments or anything else you'd like.
And Councillor Russell jumped in the queue, so please go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. To Director Bruder, boy, a lot of great information there, a lot of scary information as well. Two main questions. The first, again, with purpose-built rentals, again, just doing a little bit of Googling during your presentation. Again, there's about 25,000 that are currently being built in GTA. They're expecting another 20 to 25,000 being built Hamilton GTA over the next couple of years, extrapolating it out to about 115,000 by like 27, 28. Is there a market enough to support the demand for all of those purpose-built rentals? And I know, again, if there is a shift happening between developers maybe going from condos to purpose-built rentals, is it just going to dilute, again, the overall product that all of a sudden we're going to have a couple 100,000 of these coming on the market in a short time and the demand is only for 50, 60,000? Like, what happens at that point? Or your thoughts?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. That's a really good question, because I would tell you in the short term, right now, probably not, because I think there's a lot of angst and concern with buying a home, and I think this provides an opportunity for someone, or even a family, depending on the rental, the opportunity to at least secure a home, and they're not financially tied to it in the same way that an owner would be, in terms of having to put all that money down. Yeah, they're paying rent, but it provides kind of an easier way, at least to initially secure the housing that they need. Over the long term, it's hard to say. It kind of depends on where the market goes again. Like, you could see a shift where all of a sudden, you know, it makes more sense again to go back to ownership. I don't know, but it could. But in my mind, for the time being, I think a lot of municipalities have seen very, very slow upticks in rental offerings, a lot of them, not just us. So I think it takes a while before you get to the point where the market's completely saturated.
Yeah, thank you for that. And again, it's interesting to see, like, also, again, correlating with that is rents are actually dropping in Ontario, where, again, I think this year is almost 7% so far, where, again, it just makes that viability of that market just questionable. If you're an investor building this out, I know a lot of it's funded through CMHC, so I understand, again, why they're doing it. I question, again, the long-term availability if it actually starts getting built out. Next question, regarding the actual condos being built. Again, not holding to anything, but again, if we ever get to a point where the economy recovers and there's like a magical green light that happens, again, I'm looking at ours, and right now slide 16 says we have 6,000 approved dwellings currently. Again, by the time we hit that magical green light, we could be 7,000, 8,000, depending on where things are and when that happens. Every municipality along the Golden Horseshoe in Niagara, GTA, is going to have numbers close to that or much, much higher. So what happens to that market if all of a sudden all these start coming online for pre-sale, and again, the market the demand is not there to purchase, to get enough investment in there. Like, it becomes like all of a sudden I go back to that, the cost per square footing is going to either drop, or the amenities are going to drop, or they're not going to be, again, enticing at all. And I just see this, like, we're going to get the go sign and everybody's going to be in quicksand, because there's going to be so much going on in the market that I just don't know how you're going to get to a point where you can raise enough capital to actually get any of these individuals built out. Unless there's like some program coming from the government somewhere down the road in Bill 61, where, again, they subsidize everything and bail them out. Just your thoughts.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I mean, you hearken back to a number of years ago when the development industry was booming, and these condos were not just going through the plain, they were getting built. Like, you look at municipalities, like I'm from, everybody knows I'm from Kitchener-Waterloo, and I've seen the condo market there explode. I think when you see that proverbial green light, I think the market probably is there for what's in the pipeline now, because otherwise, if it wasn't, then I think what you'd see is, you'd see developers pivoting to what the market would yield. I think you would see, and I've already heard rumblings of it, I mentioned it earlier, you would see some kind of decreases in zoning that would coincide. You would see, for example, maybe less height they want to go with, instead of having that superstructure to build and the cost of that, maybe they go to a stacked townhouse or something like that. Maybe it's timber, maybe it's easier to build. I think you could see a little bit of that, but, I think if we got that proverbial green light and things all of a sudden started to take off, I think it would take a significant amount of an influx of stock to get to that point. So.
Yeah, and that's, again, one of my concerns is, again, doing some research, and again, I know Councilor Mickelk and I follow the same mortgage guy online who brings a lot of great intel. But again, like there's like 65% of, again, initial investment is from investors, again, with no intention of actually keeping it and living in it. It's just for investment purposes. And I'm wondering if the GTA market and the implosion of the condo market there is going to, again, have long-term implications on whether or not they will see this as a viable investment vehicle down the road. Last question, and maybe a quick one you can answer. Of the 6,000 that are currently approved, how many of them are by individual developers? So like, are there, say, 12 to 14 developers that have approvals on those 6,000, or is it much more? Like, is there a possibility that they could be staggering them to the market if they have more than one location that they're going to be building out?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I mean, again, those 6,000 are the ones we know about, and to be clear, a lot of them are from the Prudence development site, right? Like, that's a good chunk, which we always envisioned it kind of would be. But there's a few other areas too, where we could see a significant amount of units pop up. So, you know, there'd be a handful. I don't know if you're going to see more than, 10 to 12 to 14. There's probably a smaller amount of them. So I don't think that potential is there, but.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Russell. Councillor Retchema, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mary. Thank you for the presentation, Matt. One question, is there something in our, so we were talking earlier on about, so the market being flooded with rental units, potentially, or just the incentive seems to be there to potentially build purpose-built rentals, which can be a very good thing. Is there something in our official plan or somewhere that prevents or sort of slows down or stops somebody who wants to convert a rental building over to, for example, a condominium?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, there isn't, Councillor.
Okay.
Not currently, no.
Is that tied, maybe it's something that's tied to CMHC funding? Something, I just remember something, well, you can't just flip it over, there's something in the way, it may have something to do with some CMHC fund, what is it, CMHC funding? Okay, thank you. Another question, is there any timeline proposed for the merging of the conservation authorities, or is it just kind of theory right now?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I've asked that question too. I haven't gotten too far. So to the best of my knowledge, I don't know of any firm timeline. I think it's just being talked about. But again, the message I keep getting from NPCA staff is, don't worry, Matt, business as usual for now, for the foreseeable future. And that's what I hear.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and question number 3, how hard is it for you? I know you said you're going to be bringing the official plan to us in the new year, but how hard has it been for you to move through that and to incorporate the region's policies, knowing that the province is proposing to standardize the format of the official plan across Ontario?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, it's very tricky, and to the point where I've actually even been kind of in dialogue with Mr. Helinski, our legal representative too, because, right now that's not in place yet. That's part of Bill 60 that's still in the kind of information getting stages for the province. Who knows how fast they move on it. They've been known to move quickly on other things. I think there's going to be quite a bit of pushback that continues to come their way from municipalities. I don't know if that matters, but it does make it very difficult. And again, I get the point of trying to standardize what's included in an official plan, but you're taking out that whole thing of, there's not really any two municipalities that are exactly equal, right? Yeah. So they need to be afforded some opportunity to structure the official plan as they need. And I think some of the what's been proposed is pretty prescriptive, but it's been very challenging for us. So the question is, if we move forward before that's in place yet, does that mean, we can proceed as we were intending to with ours? Or do we need to move forward when that comes into place? I'm being told it's the earlier one, but again, those conversations still continue. So it's still, to be honest with you, a little bit of a hazy topic.
Yeah. Adds to the whole haziness of everything. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Brunet, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Murray, through you to the Director Bruder. So Matt, thanks for the year in review. So slide 8 and Bill 23, you talk about the removal of regional planning responsibilities. So that's been 8 months, and then you talk about trying to make the best of what you have and operating with some vacancies and some some FTEs that you have, you know, made decisions on deferring or removing. So what, you know, back up to when the regional planning was working full bore, how much support were they providing to you and your staff?
Through you, Madam Chair, let me think how I can put this to you. There was support provided in terms of, like I said, there were some things that they would review through a memorandum of understanding, environmental impact studies, archaeology, instead of us having to bear the brunt of those types of reviews. Well, they would do those, and they would provide their commentary, and they would provide green light or not with respect to the deliverable being acceptable. So there was some pressure, certainly, that was taken off of us with those things. However, dealing with other issues, and I think it's part and parcel with having, you know, a two-tiered system. There was also inefficiencies that were happening, a lot of them, on a variety of issues that we don't need to get into, but that caused more time to be occupied trying to sift through those. So it's kind of a give and take, you know. Yes, they did provide support on some things, but on others, it's a little bit easier for us to have the ability to deal with it solely within ourselves, if that makes sense.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. I'm asking the question only because, you know, a lot of what we're talking about here tonight is, you know, the way the market is now, and we're all trying to forecast, okay, how long is this gonna last? Is it ever gonna come back? What's it gonna look like? How's the market gonna change? You know, and I look at, you know, what the trends are, and, you know, you've identified over the last 10 years, the average, you know, you talk about 327 building, you know, dwelling, you know, units. And I'm just trying to, you know, look forward, and when the market does pick up, and we're back to the point where, you know, it's a brisk market, you know, what's that gonna look like for you and your staff? I mean, you know, I look at the org chart, you know, never would have thought we would have had a municipal law enforcement, you know, team like we have today. And, you know, if somebody would have told me that, I would have said, not in a million years. Well, it's here. So, you know, 10 years from now, does it double in size? Does it go backwards? You know, like these are the questions that, you know, one has to ask. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that as we move through this market.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, maybe I'll go to the planning complement first. It definitely something I think about all the time, because you're right, like things could change, things could get very, very busy. Like I can tell you when development activity was at its height a few years ago, it was very, very challenging. Like it was nonstop, like to the point where staff were very highly leveraged. But, you know, moving forward, it's again going to be hard to predict when that happens, but when it does, I think that's when it's incumbent on me to make an adjustment. You know, I think that's when I need to be coming to you. I need to try to foresee when this could happen, and then I think if we need to make changes and add resources, we will. I can tell you for the time being, you know, and I don't do this just in a vacuum. Obviously, it's a collective thing. We all talk amongst our department. Everything is a conversation, and you know, we're working through things as they exist today. But when the time comes where we do perhaps need to increase complement, increase resources, you can bet I'll be in front of you. I'll be giving you the reasons why and what it looks like. And that's certainly not off the table if development gets back to the way it was before or more, which is entirely possible or likely. It's just a question of when. The MLE department, will it double in size? Probably not in the foreseeable future. But, you know, again, when you think about all the bylaws that need to be enforced across the municipality, and when I first you know, assumed leadership of that department, it was an office of one. And I can tell you, one staff to go across the whole town is impossible. Even with the complement now, you know, there's a lot of ground to be covered and a lot of bylaws to enforce. So, you know, the team has been functioning, in my opinion, fine, the way they are. But again, you know, should there be a need, I'll certainly be in front of you and I'll be making a business case for it.
Thanks for that response. Through you, Chair Murray, just a final question. Through you, Chair, maybe to the CAO. So Mike, I'm wondering, you know, we keep hearing over and over and over again about, you know, the province pushing, you know, shared services. We're going to have a report that's going to come in front of us in the next couple of days to talk about a shared service that, you know, we're having a recommendation to disband. So I'm just wondering, you know, we're hearing lots of, you know, people say, you know, like Mr. Bruder says about two-tiered government, redundancy. all those people that were in planning at the region, where are they now? And have those people been repurposed? And, where are we going with, everything that's happening down here in the region when it comes to working more efficiently?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the counselor. It's a good question, Counselor, and, I've been a proponent, as I think a lot of you around this table, on shared services. And we've seen where shared services work really well. And I cite our partners in Pelham on a number of initiatives, whether it be climate change and environmental services, whether it be the library, even more recently, our exploration around emergency management, and some other things we're looking at. There's those that haven't worked well, and you're right, we're going to hear a little bit about that in the coming days. Your question specifically around the region and where some of those employees find themselves, I would say, in my understanding, and I say this not knowing details of the region's HR plans and any transitions of those employees and exactly to what roles, but a lot of them did find themselves filling gaps and entering other lines of work in the region, specifically and mostly with Public Works, as well as some with economic development. And again, can't speak to any vacancies or how many people may have found or how many vacancies may have been eliminated. But I think, when you look at efficiencies, we can and should and need to do better together. Again, it happens in some areas and it happens well, and then the other areas we find ourselves, I think as Director Bruder politely tried to articulate, where we're not seeing that same level of support and same level of help. You think about someone like Khaldun around urban design, we use them extensively. That partnership has worked really well. But when we find ourselves stepping over each other as it relates to planning approvals or other sorts of approvals or a willingness to work together, often it requires Director Bruder, myself getting involved, and that shouldn't happen. There should be an ability and an appropriateness for things to happen without senior level staff getting involved. And so am I hopeful it gets better? I don't know. I think you're going to have to ask me this question again in 2026. But do I think that there's opportunities? Yes. Will we get there? That's another question. But from a Lincoln perspective, we'll continue seeking out opportunities. I know more recently, again, Pelham's reached out to us to talk about IT and IT technology. And so we'll continue to explore those things and bring them to council.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Timmers, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Director Bruder. So my question's around the Conservation Authority. To me, it's very worrisome to go from 36 to 7 in a massive area. How are we going to have oversight on our protected conservation lands within the town of Lincoln when we're just basically lost in a big sea? Like, who's going to be providing that oversight?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's actually a concern I share, Councillor. There's ways that could be addressed maybe within the restructured system. Maybe there's still the pockets of the staff that were previously existing, for example, for NPCA, and they still look, maybe it's broken down into sub-areas and there's still teams that are assigned to different parts and they don't necessarily, but usually when you look at an amalgamation of conservation authorities or any entity like that, usually there's a reduction. There's, you're trying to operationalize that and, reduce resource. So it is a concern that I share as well. I wish I had a better answer for you, but I don't know yet how the mechanics are going to work. This has all been very high level so far.
Through you, Chair, it's just concerning to me because as a landowner with conservation pieces to it, and there are incentive programs to maintain those areas and to not disturb them or change them, or I just wonder, not everyone is going to play by the rules. And if no one's looking anymore, there will be things that will happen in some of those areas, and I could foresee it. And I'm just wondering if it's going to fall more to the municipality to oversee. I don't know how that would work, but it's just concerning to me because we don't want to lose our conservation lands. over time, and I could see that happening. The other thing, where was I going with this now? I've lost my train of thought. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Even as we exist today, trying to get someone from the Conservation Authority to come when you have an issue is extremely difficult, even right now. You're waiting months. So, when this happens, you could be waiting years, or maybe never, or you just wouldn't even bother, at some point. The other thing would be, are they also going to be, I don't know if this is still happening, commenting on applications? Are they a commenting agency? Would that still occur? Sorry, through you, Chair.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Their scope's been limited a little bit on what they comment on. Now it's more just the regulated areas, flood plains, things like that. So kind of the scope's been reduced a little bit compared to what it was, and I'd have to get back to you with the specifics of that. So they do, the answer is yes, they do comment on development applications, but the scope in which they comment is reduced substantially.
I was just thinking out loud, I think if they're still in that capacity, that might be a way to oversee, from things happening that shouldn't be happening. But anyway, it's just very concerning to me, but thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Miklick, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you too, Matt. When I'm looking at the development charges and that sort of thing, and that one slide is it is scary. 39 permits in a whole year. We forecast, I'm sure, more than that. I don't know the numbers. What are we hearing from developers? And I want to talk about our competitiveness with other municipalities. Let's say Niagara-on-the-Lake, let's say Grimsby, let's say other municipalities of our sort of size and sort of desire to want to build in. Are we competitive with our DC charges? Are we hearing from developers that it's too expensive to build in Lincoln? Are we hearing things like that?
Through you, Madam Chair. Two ways to answer the question. Are we hearing it's expensive? Sure. But I think you'd hear that no matter what the charges are, development charges are. Is it too expensive to build in Lincoln? No, I'm not hearing that at all, actually. I hear it's expensive, generally speaking, development charges from a municipal-wide perspective. I don't think that's a deterrent here from my understanding. Again, I think, and we pride ourselves on it, we're a municipality that collaborates well. We streamline things where we can. We're efficient and we move things along. That's worth a lot to developers. So from a competitiveness perspective, I think that bodes really well for us. But are our charges on the high side in Niagara? Yeah, they are. But again, our municipality is a little bit different than others too. When you look at our urban areas, you look at how things are spread out, you look at how servicing implications go along with that. The town can be expensive to service too, in some perspectives. So all that plays in, but it's not a trend I'm hearing where, development charges are too high, we're not going to build here. That's not what I hear.
Okay, I just want to make sure that if we are hearing that we're addressing that, because when you mentioned earlier about at any given moment, we can have an we can have a building permit application of 200-300 houses or 300 units. But when you multiply that by, say, 5-10 grand, I don't know what it is, the difference between ourselves, we're all competing for condo projects. Developers want to spend as little as possible, I would believe, these days. And when you're talking about a development of, say, 200-300 units, that can make a difference between a make or break. And if I think we want to make sure that we remain competitive, especially for those larger scale developments, wherever they occur. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I did have one quick question on slide 8, when you, as one of my colleagues had mentioned, the regional staff that are going to be available to municipalities as required for support in a fee-for-service model. Who's paying for that? Is that a cost that's getting downloaded onto us as a municipality, or is that going to the developers, or who's going to be footing that bill?
Yeah, that bill would be, if we require that, it would be the responsibility of the applicant to pay that fee.
Excellent, thank you very much. Great, so there being no further questions, I have a motion moved by Councillor Renchema, sorry. That committee receive and file for information the Planning and Development 2025 Year in Review. I will ask our clerk to open that vote.
Thanks, Chair. The vote's open. Councilor Renchema? Thank you. I'll close that vote, and that carries.
Excellent. So now we move on to item number 9 in our agenda, which is the General Business and Finance Committee agenda. Item 9.1 is delegations. We have no delegations. We have no reports for the General Business and Finance Committee agenda, and we have no confidential items. So that moves us to item number 11, which is committee remarks. Do we have any committee remarks? All right, seeing none, there being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned at 8:54 PM. Thank you.